Dead America. Tales from the Outer Banks. The Bridge, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Day 0, 7:27 a.m. Roanoke Island. Matt sat on the edge of the bed, groggy, eyes still heavy from the previous day's work. He looked over to the small table where a miniature pot of coffee brewed, taking its sweet time. The room was small and unfinished, the drywall unpainted, the bed barely enough for him and his tall frame. There was a single cheap dresser and a folding chair. No television, no radio, in fact. The only other item was a clock on the wall. What it lacked in comfort, it more than made up for in price. Free. The room was above the major bar project he had been working on for the last couple of weeks. Normally these jobs were started in the off-season, but a water pipe bursting moved the timeline up. "Come on, coffee pot, don't do me like that," Matt muttered, rubbing his calloused hands over his face. The coffee pot sputtered, struggling to push the water through the grounds. As he stared, his cell phone rang. A picture of his wife Stephanie popped up, bringing a smile to his face. He swiped answer. "You're up early today," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "That tends to happen when the sun's barely up and I realize my husband didn't come home last night." Stephanie's voice had a slight edge to it, but he could hear the smile behind her words. "I'm sorry, hun. I texted you about 10 last night that I was going to be stuck out here on site. By the time I realized you didn't respond, it was after midnight." Matt shifted on the bed, the cheap springs creaking beneath him. "You know it's only a 20-minute drive back to the house, Matt." Stephanie's tone wasn't harsh, more playful than anything. "Yeah, I know, but yesterday was a beast." Matt stretched, his shoulders popping from sleeping on the uncomfortable mattress. "Had 3 of my guys call out sick, and when we got rolling, we couldn't stop mid-job." He glanced around the sparse room, sawdust visible on his clothes that were draped over the folding chair. "Is the job going well at least?" The concern in her voice was genuine. She'd been with him through the lean times when jobs were scarce and understood what this contract meant for them. "I think so. We're supposed to have a delivery rolling in at 8, so I'm hoping we can get close to wrapping it up today." Matt watched the coffee maker, willing it to brew faster as he spoke. "And if you can't?" There was a hint of challenge in her question. Matt smiled. "Don't worry, come hell or high water, I'm going to be home today." "I'm gonna hold you to that," Stephanie replied. Matt heard a heavy door slam in the bar below, followed by a young man yelling out, "Hello." He pulled the phone to the side to respond. "That you, Anthony?" he called out, his voice echoing in the unfinished room. "Yeah, it's me, boss," came the reply from below. "I'll be down in a second." Matt turned his attention back to the phone call. The noise from below faded as Anthony presumably moved farther into the bar. "Sorry, hun, my lone crew member just showed up." "Well, go get your work done so you can come home to me," Stephanie said, the warmth in her voice making him miss her even more. "Yes, ma'am. And let me know when you think you'll be here, and I'll have some dinner going for you." Matt felt a pang of hunger at the thought of her cooking. The vending machine chips and soda that had been his dinner the night before seemed even more pathetic in comparison. "You treat me too good. And don't you forget it." He could picture her standing in their kitchen, coffee in hand, that smile that still made his heart skip after all these years. Both of them laughed for a moment, the sound easing some of the tension in his shoulders. "Love you, hun," Matt said softly. "Love you too." Matt clicked off the phone and slid it into his pocket as the coffee maker finally finished squeezing out the last bit of liquid. The aroma filled the small room, momentarily masking the smell of wood stain and drywall dust. "About time," he said with satisfaction. Matt grabbed a beat-up travel mug, the metal scratched and dented from years of being tossed into his truck and onto job sites. He dumped the entire contents of the small pot into it, not bothering with cream or sugar. He snapped on the lid, took a long drink before stepping out from the small room, emerging onto the top of a metal stairwell that led down to the main floor of the bar. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air and highlighting the progress they'd made. Despite being short-handed, they'd managed to tear out the old water-damaged bar and prep the area for the new installation. Drop cloths covered most of the floor, protecting it from the constant rain of sawdust and debris. "Don't tell me you spent the night here, boss," Anthony called up from below. He was a good kid, early 20s and eager to learn. Matt had hired him 6 months ago with barely any experience, but he'd proven himself a quick study and a hard worker. "Yeah, I spent another hour prepping stuff for today and just passed out." Matt made his way down the stairs, each step ringing metallically through the empty bar. He took another sip of coffee, feeling the caffeine beginning to clear the fog from his mind. "You know I would have stayed with you, Matt." Anthony was already dressed for work, tool belt slung low on his hips, a pencil tucked behind his ear. "Well, there's only one bed, and while you're handsome, you're just not my type. I'm a cuddler, and I don't think either of us want to go down that road." Matt kept his face straight as he delivered the line. Both men stood there for a moment before bursting out into laughter at the absurdity of it. Their voices echoed off the bare walls and unfinished ceiling, filling the space with sound. As they laughed, the bar door opened, and Norma, the bar owner, walked in. She was in her early 50s, several tattoos on her arms, carrying a large coffee cup, and as salty as can be. "Well, at least someone's having a good time in this mess," she said, looking around at the construction site that had once been her orderly establishment. "Morning, Norma," Matt greeted her, still smiling from the joke. "Matt, Anthony," she nodded to each in turn, her eyes scanning the workspace with the critical gaze of someone who paid the bills. "Tell me there's more coming." Matt exchanged a quick glance with Anthony, knowing the news wouldn't be welcome. "I'm afraid it's just us today." Norma's eyebrows shot up, her lips thinning in displeasure. "Well, I hope you're charging me by the job and not by the hour." "Don't worry, Norma, it's not your fault most of my guys are calling out. I'll make sure the job gets done on time, and I'll honor the estimate even if I lose some on this job." It was the truth. Matt prided himself on his word even when it cost him. Norma looked Matt up and down, finally nodding in agreement. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "You're a straight shooter, ain't you, Matt?" "Straight as they come, ma'am." He gave her a respectful nod, appreciating that she recognized his integrity. "You drop that ma'am shit right now." Her voice was gruff, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. Matt chuckled as he responded, "You got it, Norma." Norma nodded at him before walking over to the bar, which was covered in plastic and dust from the construction work going on in the bar. The heavy sheet of translucent plastic protected what remained of her inventory, sealed down with blue painter's tape along the edges. She looked for the edge of the plastic to lift up, not able to find it after several moments of fumbling. Finally, she cursed under her breath, pulling out a knife from her back pocket, flicking it open and cutting a hole in the middle of the plastic. The sharp blade sliced through with barely a sound, creating a clean opening. She reached through, grabbing a bottle of whiskey, popping it open and pouring in a splash into her coffee. The amber liquid swirled into the dark brew, the smell of good bourbon momentarily overpowering the sense of sawdust and stain. She slipped the bottle back underneath the plastic before letting out a whistle. "Give me your tape." She held out her hand expectantly. Anthony didn't hesitate, grabbing a roll of tape off a nearby table and tossing it over to her. She caught it one-handed, ripped off a piece to repair the hole in the plastic before throwing the roll back with equal precision. "Do you boys need me for anything?" she asked, taking a sip of her newly fortified coffee. Before they could respond, a loud honking sound came from the back parking lot. The noise echoed through the unfinished space, startling a bird that had made its way in through an open window. It fluttered across the ceiling before finding its way back outside. "That should be the new bar base if you want to approve it before we unload it," Matt said, already setting his coffee down on a nearby sawhorse. "Yeah, sure, why not?" Norma took another sip of her coffee, following Matt toward the back exit. Her boots left distinct impressions in the fine layer of sawdust that coated everything. "Anthony, grab the hand trucks and meet us out back," Matt called over his shoulder, pushing open the heavy metal door that led to the delivery area. Anthony nodded, moving toward the storage closet where they kept the equipment. The sound of rummaging followed as Matt and Norma stepped outside. As they emerged into the new morning light, the delivery man hopped down from the cab of his truck. In the back sat the finished wood for the bar, the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation. The driver was a burly man in his 40s, with a weathered face and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Sorry I'm running late," the trucker said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Traffic was a mess coming onto the island. "I haven't even finished my first cup of coffee, so you're good," Matt replied, gesturing toward the back of the truck. The morning sun was warm against his skin, promising another hot day ahead. "If y'all want to check it out, I'll get the paperwork in order." The driver moved toward his cab, pulling out a clipboard and flipping through pages. "Sounds good." Matt led Norma toward the rear of the vehicle, unlatching the heavy door and swinging it upward to reveal the cargo area. Matt and Norma stepped into the back of the truck, immediately spotting what they were looking for. There were rows of wooden planks sitting on pallets, wrapped up in protective plastic and secured with straps for the journey. The smell of fresh-cut wood and finishing oil was strong in the enclosed space. Norma pulled out her knife, carefully cutting the plastic away to reveal the polished finish. The wood gleamed under the morning light, the grain pattern visible beneath the glossy surface. She ran her hand along the edge, feeling for any imperfections. "Does that look good to you?" Matt asked, watching her face for any sign of disappointment. He'd spent hours going over the design with her, wanting to make sure the finished product matched her vision for the place. "It's a bit shinier than I would like, but I can live with it," Norma replied with a small shrug, her version of approval. Matt chuckled a bit at her typical, understated reaction, which was cut off when someone began banging on the side of the truck. In an instant, it sounded like several arms thrashing against the metal, the impacts creating a cacophony that echoed through the cargo area. The noise was so sudden and violent that both of them jolted in surprise. "What the hell is that?" Matt's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing. Matt and Norma marched out of the truck, turning the corner and freezing when they saw a man in tattered clothes attacking the delivery driver. The zombie latched onto the driver's neck with its teeth, biting and pulling its head back to rip flesh from bone. The delivery driver tried to scream, but the vocal cords were too damaged, only a wet gurgling sound escaping as blood poured down his shirt front. "Jesus Christ," Matt shouted, the coffee in his stomach turning to acid as he witnessed the horrific attack. Matt rushed forward, adrenaline surging through his system. He grabbed the zombie by the back of its filthy shirt and pulled it off the driver with all his strength. As he separated them, blood spurted from the driver's torn neck in rhythmic pulses, splashing onto the side of the truck and across Matt's work boots. Matt didn't give the zombie a chance to turn around, instead slamming it face first into the side of the truck with a sickening thud. He put his forearm into the back of its neck, putting his full weight on it, pinning the creature against the metal surface. The zombie's skull made a hollow sound as it connected with the truck, but the creature continued to struggle with unnatural strength. The creature thrashed about, trying to break free, its nails scraping against the truck's paint. Norma looked over to the driver, who was bleeding out and seconds away from dying. The man had collapsed to his knees, hands clutched uselessly at his ruined throat, eyes wide with shock and the growing glaze of approaching death. The bar owner pulled her knife out, flicking it open and marching over to the zombie. Without hesitation, she began rapidly stabbing the creature in the side of the torso, a move that would drop even the strongest of men. Blood oozed from the wounds, darker than it should be, almost black against the tattered clothing. However, the zombie didn't react to the strike, continuing to thrash about as if it felt nothing. "What the hell?" Matt grunted, struggling to maintain his hold on the creature. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his muscles straining against the zombie's relentless efforts to free itself. "This guy's on something." Norma stepped back. The zombie managed to turn itself around, forcing Matt to put his arm into its chest to hold it at bay. Both of them looked at the creature, seeing the dead eyes, the bite wounds on it, and the driver's throat still dangling from its mouth. The sight was so grotesque, so impossible, that Matt's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Norma reacted on instinct, stepping forward and driving the tip of the knife through the zombie's eye, straight into the brain. The blade sank in with almost no resistance, sliding home with a wet sound that turned Matt's stomach. The ghoul fell silent, its body going instantly limp. It slid down to the ground, collapsing in a heap at Matt's feet. Both Matt and Norma stared at the creature, struggling to understand what just happened. Chapter 2. Norma and Matt stared at the scene before them, the dead zombie by their feet and the delivery driver who was now motionless as blood continued pouring out of the wound. The crimson pool spread across the asphalt, reflecting the morning sunlight in a sickening sheen. Neither spoke for several seconds. The only sound, the distant call of gulls and the soft ping of the truck's cooling engine. "Thanks for having my back, Norma," Matt finally said, his voice breaking the stunned silence. He wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a smear of the driver's blood across his skin without realizing it. "Just make sure you have mine when the police get here," Norma replied, her usual gruffness returning despite the tremor in her hands. It was 100% self-defense. Matt looked down at the creature, its face now partially caved in where it had connected with the truck, the knife wound in its eye leaking dark fluid. "Damn right it was." Norma's voice was firm, though her face had gone several shades paler than normal. She'd been in her share of bar fights over the years, but nothing had prepared her for this. Norma reached down to the dead zombie, grabbing her knife and pulling it free with a wet, suctioning sound. She wiped it on his clothes before closing and pocketing it. The two of them continued staring at the carnage, unsure of what to do next. The delivery driver's eyes were fixed and glassy, staring at nothing as the last of his life's blood drained away. "I suppose we should call someone," Matt said, patting his pockets for his phone. "Jesus Christ." Anthony's yell from the doorway pulled Matt and Norma's attention. The young construction worker stood in the entrance, the hand truck right in front of him. His knuckles were white where he gripped the metal handle, his face drained of color as he took in the gruesome scene. "What the hell did I miss?" Anthony's voice cracked with shock, his eyes darting from the bodies to Matt's blood-splattered clothes. Matt pointed to the corpses as he spoke, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "This asshole attacked and killed the driver, then tried to do the same thing to us," Norma added, crossing her arms over her chest. "So we defended ourselves." Matt gave Norma a wink, confirming that he had her back. She appreciated the gesture, responding with a slight nod. "Come on, let's get back inside. We need to get the cops over here." Matt motioned toward the door, suddenly eager to be away from the bloody scene. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and nauseous. He wanted walls between him and what had just happened. Time to process the impossible violence they'd witnessed. Matt and Norma walked back towards the door, their backs to the corpses. Anthony stood in the doorway, staring past them. His face soon expressed confusion, eyebrows furrowing and mouth dropping open. Matt recognized the look. It was pure, unfiltered horror. "What is it?" Matt asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Anthony couldn't speak, only point back towards the delivery driver. Matt and Norma looked back, muttering confused obscenities under their breath as they watched the driver begin to move again. What had been a motionless corpse seconds ago was now twitching, then shifting, then pushing itself up from the ground with jerky movements. "My God, buddy, how are you still moving?" Matt stared in disbelief. The driver's throat was completely destroyed, blood soaking the front of his shirt and pooled beneath him. No one could lose that much blood and survive, yet the man was getting to his feet, swaying slightly as if drunk. The zombified driver snapped his attention towards the trio as soon as the sound reached its ears. It let out a moan, a wet, gurgling sound that could never come from functioning vocal cords. The creature scrambled to its feet and sprinted towards them with shocking speed, arms outstretched, fingers clawing at the air. Norma reached back for her knife as the creature closed the gap, the morning light catching on the blade as she flicked it open. Before it could reach them, Anthony reacted, pushing the hand truck forward, the front edge smacking into the zombie's shins with a hollow metal clang. The impact caused the zombie to stumble forward, its face hitting the metal handles of the hand truck with enough force to shatter a normal person's teeth. Anthony shoved both to the side, the metal clattering to the ground as the zombie fought with it to get back up, its limbs tangled in the frame. "Run!" Matt's voice cracked as he shouted, raw fear propelling the word from his throat. The three of them rushed back through the door, slamming it shut and locking it before the zombie could follow. The solid wood barrier seemed flimsy suddenly, inadequate protection against the nightmare outside. Within seconds, it began banging on the door, trying to get inside. Each impact sent vibrations through the frame, punctuated by inhuman moans from the other side. The three survivors stared at the door in disbelief, struggling to make sense of what was happening. Matt's mind raced through possible explanations. Drugs? Some kind of psychotic break? A bizarre medical condition? But nothing could account for a man with his throat torn out getting up and attacking. After a few seconds, Matt snapped into the moment, issuing orders like he was in charge of the job site. "Anthony, Norma, start calling 911. His voice was steady, despite the chaos erupting within his mind. Normally, Norma would have told him to buzz off, as she wasn't keen on taking orders in her own bar. The crossed-arm stance and narrowed eyes were her typical response to anyone attempting to direct her actions. But in this case, she followed his instructions without complaint, pulling out her phone and dialing with shaking fingers. Meanwhile, he pulled out his own phone, dialing Stephanie. His thumb slipped twice before he managed to hit the call button. "Come on, pick up," he muttered, each ring stretching his nerves tighter. The image of the driver, dead then not, flashed in his mind, raising questions he couldn't even fully form, let alone answer. Much to his relief, she answered on the second ring, her voice flowing through the speaker like a lifeline to normalcy. "Miss me already?" The playful tone in Stephanie's voice almost broke him. The gulf between her ordinary morning and the horror he'd just witnessed seemed unbridgeable. "Good, you're safe," Matt sagged against the bar, relief washing through him. Stephanie's voice filled with concern, picking up on the strain in his tone. "Why wouldn't I be? I need you to do me a favor. Don't leave the house today." Matt turned away from the others, lowering his voice, as if that could somehow shield his wife from the danger. Stephanie hesitated, hearing the fear in Matt's voice. "Baby, what's wrong?" Matt hemmed and hawed for a moment before finding the words. How could he explain what he'd seen when he barely believed it himself? "I don't know, but I don't think it's safe outside right now." "Matt," the worry in her voice was palpable. "Stephanie, just please stay inside until I get home. Lock the doors, pull the curtains, and don't let anyone know you're home. Can you do that for me?" It wasn't a question so much as a plea. "Matt, you're scaring me." Her voice had lost all its earlier playfulness. "Can you do that for me?" he pressed, glancing back at the door where the banging continued, more insistent now. "Yes, of course I can. But you need to tell me what's going on," she replied. "I just watched a man get murdered. Then he got back up and tried to attack us." The words sounded insane as they left his mouth, but there was no other way to describe what had happened. Stephanie was silent for several moments, his words confusing her. He could almost picture her face, the slight furrow between her eyebrows that appeared when she was trying to process something difficult. "If that doesn't make any sense," she finally said, "tell me about it. I saw it with my own eyes and still don't believe it." Matt wiped his free hand down his face, feeling the grit of dried blood flake off. "What are you going to do?" "We're trying the police." Matt's voice trailed off as he looked over to Anthony and Norma, both of whom shook their heads, confirming they couldn't reach anybody. Anthony's expression was particularly concerning, a mixture of confusion and increasing panic. "Once we do that, I'm on my way home," Matt continued, making the decision as he spoke. Nothing mattered more than getting to Stephanie, making sure she stayed safe. "If it's dangerous outside, then you need to stay put." Her voice was firm, the protective instinct flowing both ways between them. "I promise, if it gets too bad, I'll stay inside, but I'm coming home to you." Matt's tone left no room for argument. Whatever was happening, they needed to be together. Stephanie knew that once Matt got an idea in his head, it was pointless to argue with him. "I love you, Matt. Be careful." "Love you too, Stephanie. I'll be home before you know it." He tried to infuse his voice with a confidence he didn't fully feel. Matt clicked off the phone and pocketed it. He looked over to the other two, who were growing more concerned by the moment. Anthony was pacing in short, tight circles, while Norma stared at her phone as if it had personally betrayed her. "I'm guessing nobody was home," Matt asked, already knowing the answer from their expressions. The phone just kept ringing and ringing. Anthony stopped pacing to address Matt, his young face showing the strain of their situation. "That's better than I got. It cut off after 3 rings and started screeching at me. Damn near deafened me." Norma rubbed her ear, wincing at the memory of the sound. All 3 turned towards the door as the banging intensified, as if another set of hands joined the first. The impacts came in an uneven rhythm now, sometimes overlapping, suggesting multiple attackers. "Sounds like he has a friend," Anthony said, backing further into the bar. Matt rushed over to the door, looking out the window just beside the door and spotting a second zombie that had joined the truck driver. Like the driver, it was covered in bite marks, its clothing torn and bloody. Its movements were jerky but purposeful as it pounded on the door alongside the driver. "I don't think we can stay here," Matt said, backing away from the window. "Where the hell are we going to go?" Norma demanded, her usual bluster returning in the face of her fear. "Down to my house in Avon." Matt was thinking aloud, the plan forming as he spoke. "You want to go to Avon? That's damn near in Hatteras." Norma's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Exactly. There's not much in the way of civilization once you get past the bridge. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I want to be around people much today." The implication hung in the air, whatever was happening to the driver and the first attacker. It seemed to spread through bites. The fewer people around, the better. Norma and Anthony joined him at the window, looking at the creatures trying to get inside. The sight was enough to silence any further objections. It only took a moment for them to buy into his idea, self-preservation overriding any other concerns. "So what do we do?" Anthony asked, his voice steadier than it had been moments before. Having a plan, any plan, seemed to calm him. "We're going to fight these two by the door, then get to my truck and get the hell out of here." Matt scanned the room, mentally inventorying possible weapons. "What if more show up?" Anthony voiced the fear that all of them were feeling. Norma pulled out her knife, grinning with false bravado that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Then they're gonna get cut." Anthony chuckled at the older woman's attitude, the sound strained but genuine. In the midst of the madness, her determination provided a small comfort. "All right, I'm in. How do you want to play it?" Anthony said as he looked to Matt. Matt smacked his hand on the door, feeling the heft of the wood. He thought about it for a moment, thinking back to the zombie they put down. The knife to the eye had dropped it instantly when multiple stabs to the body had done nothing. "We're going to have to get a headshot to put them down," Matt stated bluntly. "What are you talking about?" Anthony's confusion was evident. Norma caught on immediately, her eyes lighting with understanding. "That's right. I shanked that boy outside like a prison snitch and it didn't faze him. Jammed that blade into his eye and it put him to sleep." Matt contemplated for a moment, looking over to a power drill sitting on a nearby table. "Norma, grab that drill and get beside the door. I have an idea," Matt said. Norma didn't need convincing, rushing over and grabbing the drill before getting into position. She checked the battery level, full charge, thankfully, and tightened her grip on the handle. As she moved, Matt waved Anthony over to the door, positioning his worker just behind him. "When I pull this door open, their heads are going to pop in, and when they do, you do what you gotta do." Matt's instructions were sparse but clear. Norma nodded as Anthony braced his boss's position, his back against Matt's to provide additional strength. With a nod, Matt grabbed the door, unlocking it. The clicking sound of the lock releasing seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Immediately, the creatures outside pushed it inwards, hitting the human barricade after a foot of movement. The door creaked under the pressure, the hinges straining against the force of the two zombies. Matt and Anthony struggled with the weight, but held their own as the zombies pushed inwards. Matt's work boots skidded slightly on the floor as he fought to maintain his position. After a few moments, the zombified driver pushed its head inside, its mouth clattering as it bit air, teeth snapping together with audible clicks. The sound was inhuman, mechanical almost, like a broken toy. Norma wasted no time, using the drill to great efficiency. With a squeeze of the trigger, the drill bit spun, cracking through the forehead of the zombie with ease. The high-pitched whine of the tool mixed with the wet sound of penetration, a sickening combination that would haunt them all later. The creature convulsed as its brains were reduced to mush, dropping to the ground after a moment. Dark fluid splattered across the floor, some of it spraying onto Norma's boots. She barely seemed to notice, already repositioning herself for the next threat. Within seconds, the first zombie was replaced by the other one, who met a similar fate. This time, Norma didn't hesitate, driving the spinning bit directly into the creature's temple. It went down even faster than the first, collapsing into a heap just outside the threshold. With the zombies by the door down, Matt looked over to the others. Sweat dripped down his face, and his breathing came in ragged gasps from the exertion of holding the door. "Let's move." Chapter 3. Matt threw open the door, leading the trio out into the parking lot. In the distance, they could hear screaming, but were in no position to do anything about it. The sounds echoed between buildings, making it impossible to tell exactly where they were coming from. The morning air, fresh just minutes ago, now seemed charged with danger. The parking lot was clear, Matt's truck 10 yards away. The three of them ran as hard as they could to it, all three piling into the front cab. Anthony nearly tripped on a loose chunk of asphalt, catching himself at the last moment and scrambling the final few feet to the passenger door. Norma slid into the middle seat with surprising agility for a woman her age, and Matt threw himself behind the wheel. Seconds after Matt slammed the door shut, he looked over towards the street, spotting two zombies running in their direction. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their limbs pumping in jerky coordination as they closed the distance. They smacked up against the side of the truck, smearing blood on the window as they pounded against the glass with open palms. The thumping sound vibrated through the cabin, making Norma flinch. Matt was transfixed by the sight, looking at the creatures, one with bite marks on its upper body, while the other appeared to be intact, only blood pouring out of its mouth. Their faces were pressed against the glass, teeth bared in mindless hunger, eyes vacant and yet somehow focused directly on him. "Do you want me to drive?" Norma's taunt snapped Matt back into the moment. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the dashboard. Matt shook his head to clear it and jammed the key into the ignition, starting up the truck. The engine roared to life, drowning out the moans from outside. He threw it into gear as he glanced over to the road, spotting another zombie racing towards them, this one in what appeared to be a police uniform. "Hang on." Matt's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel. Matt slammed on the gas pedal, the truck lurching out from its parking spot. The back tire bounced slightly as it ran over one of the zombies' feet, doing nothing to deter the creature from its pursuit. If anything, the injury seemed to fuel its frenzy, its arms reaching out as it gave chase, despite the crushed appendage. The truck tires squealed as it picked up speed, while Matt cut the wheel sharply to the left. The vehicle fishtailed slightly, the rear end sliding across the loose gravel of the parking lot. Anthony braced himself against the dashboard, his eyes wide with terror. It took him a second to get it moving in the right direction, out towards the street. The zombie racing towards them, not breaking stride as it approached, its uniform torn and bloody around the collar where something, or someone, had taken a chunk out of its neck. Matt gripped the wheel tightly as the truck made contact with the zombie. He could hear the bones breaking on impact, the sickening crunch followed by a soft thud as the body hit the undercarriage. He watched as the ghoul vanished underneath the vehicle, the truck bouncing slightly as the tires rolled over it. Matt cut the wheel hard as he reached the road, letting off the gas so that he didn't risk losing control. The truck swung wide onto the street, the rear tire skidding slightly on the pavement before finding traction. He let his curiosity get the better of him, glancing back towards the creature he just ran over. Despite the violent impact, it was still moving on the ground, its broken body twisting as it tried to right itself. He turned his focus back to the road ahead, yelling out, "Holy shit!" Matt pulled them to the right, narrowly avoiding a car that had cut over into their lane. The front windshield was shattered, as if the car had its own impact with a zombie. Spiderweb cracks obscured most of the glass, with dark smears visible where something had hit with significant force. The driver was panicked and partially blinded by it, blissfully unaware of the accident he nearly caused. Matt kept them moving to the south towards the bridge that would take them towards his home. Getting there would be an issue, however. Traffic was increasing as more people fled whatever horror was spreading throughout the island. Cars swerved erratically, some speeding, others barely moving as drivers tried to process what was happening around them. "What the hell is happening out here?" Anthony's voice cracked as he pressed his face against the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass. Stretching out over the next several blocks, the trio spotted dozens of zombies running wild in the streets. They sprinted between cars, leapt over fallen debris, and generally moved with a shocking determination. Several of them reached out towards cars as they raced by, doing nothing but breaking their fingers as they touched metal moving at 30 miles per hour. The snapping sounds were audible even inside the cab as bones shattered on impact, yet the creatures never slowed. One poor, unfortunate soul was on a motorcycle, doing his best to weave in and out between the ghouls and cars on the street. He was going too fast for his own good, his desperation to escape evident in the way he pushed the bike beyond what was safe. So, the slightest touch by a zombie set him off balance, the handlebars wobbling dangerously as he tried to compensate. The trio watched helplessly as the bike wobbled from side to side, the man trying desperately to maintain control. The front wheel caught an edge of broken pavement, sending the man tumbling over the front handlebars, slamming hard onto the ground. The bike skidded away, sparks flying as metal scraped against asphalt. Normally, the helmet protecting the rider's head is a good thing. In this case, however, all it did was prolong the man's suffering. Within moments of hitting the ground, 4 zombies were on top of him, ripping at his flesh with ferocious intensity. His screams echoed through the street, muffled by the helmet but still clearly audible. His arms flailed, trying to push them off, but there were too many. Blood sprayed in all directions as they tore into him. "We need to get out of here." Anthony's face had gone several shades paler, his voice barely a whisper. "Working on it." Matt's response was tense. His jaw clenched so tight that the muscles stood out along his jawline. "Can't be more than a mile to the bridge," Norma said, scanning the road ahead. Matt let out a deep breath, as if to steady himself. He kept the truck moving at a fast pace, but slow enough to give himself time to react to anything that happened in front of him. The 2 passengers continued looking out in horror at what was happening to their quiet community. Shops that they'd passed 100 times were now scenes of carnage, blood splattered across windows, doors hanging open with no one minding the entrance. A woman ran past a diner, screaming as 2 zombies pursued her. A man tried to open his car door while 3 creatures pounded on the window, the glass beginning to crack under the repeated impacts. Matt continued speeding ahead, getting within a few blocks of the turnoff to the bridge but slowing down when he spotted a pileup at the intersection. 3 cars had collided, one flipped onto its roof, the others crumpled against each other like discarded paper. Several zombies circled the wrecks, pounding on windows, reaching inside where glass had shattered. "Hang on, this is going to get bumpy." Matt's warning was unnecessary. His passengers were already bracing themselves, fingers digging into whatever handhold they could find. Matt picked up the speed a bit, knowing he may have to plow through some of the creatures that were running around the wrecked cars, trying to get to the injured passengers inside. The truck's engine roared as he accelerated, drawing the attention of several ghouls, who turned to face the new threat. As they got within a block of the intersection, he began turning to the left to head to the bridge, only to suddenly cut back to the right, causing everyone in the truck to scream at the sudden change. The tires screeched in protest, the truck lurching violently to the side as Matt executed the sharp turn. Norma began to curse him out over the sudden turn, only to realize it was in response to a delivery truck barreling out of control towards them. The massive vehicle plowed ahead without care, its driver either panicked or no longer in control. Matt accelerated, heading to the south just far enough to avoid impact. The truck passed so close that they could feel the wind of its passage buffeting their vehicle. Anthony and Norma looked back, watching the delivery truck jump the curb and slam into 2 parked cars. The crash was deafening, metal crunching against metal, glass shattering and raining down onto the sidewalk. A fire hydrant caught in the collision erupted, sending a plume of water 30 feet into the air. Matt kept his attention forward, getting them back in the right direction after driving around the pile of wrecked cars in the intersection. Once he saw open road ahead of him, he floored it, the truck surging forward as the engine responded to the demand for more power. The truck sped off towards the bridge, putting the intersection pileup in the rearview mirror. He glanced back, seeing a handful of other cars were doing the same, following the path he'd forged through the chaos. A small convoy of vehicles, all with the same idea: get off the island as quickly as possible. "That's some nice driving there, Matt." Norma's voice still held a trace of tension, but there was genuine appreciation in her tone. "I always wanted to be a race car driver growing up." Matt didn't take his eyes off the road as he spoke, his focus absolute. "Well, if you need a sponsor, my bar's happy to chip in." Norma's attempt at humor was strained, but welcome nonetheless. Matt smirked, appreciative of the brief reprieve from the situation. The road ahead was clearer now, most of the zombies concentrated back in the more populated areas they'd just left. Anthony turned and looked out the back window, spotting the half-dozen cars that followed close behind. "Looks like we got a convoy," he said. "At least we're not leading it." Matt motioned to the front, towards a few cars a quarter-mile ahead. Despite them moving away from the main portion of Roanoke Island, several zombies still roamed around, running after the cars in the road. They appeared from between buildings, burst out of shop doors, all seemingly drawn to the movement and noise of the fleeing vehicles. Norma looked back as they passed a large cluster of creatures, muttering curses as the ghouls followed the convoy. At least a dozen had taken up chase, their dead eyes fixed on the retreating vehicles, arms pumping as they tried to keep pace. Those assholes really are like a cat with a laser pointer. If it moves, they're chasing after it. Norma's observation was accurate, if crude. Don't worry, we're leaving them in the dust. Anthony's reassurance came as the zombies fell further behind. A few seconds later, the lead cars of the convoy reached the bridge, the truck following shortly thereafter. The bridge stretched out before them, spanning the water in a concrete and steel lifeline to the main island. It didn't take long before they were over the water, all 4 lanes wide open. Matt's eyes got big as he spotted a massive tractor-trailer barreling down the road in the opposite direction, the vehicle losing control and jackknifing. It happened almost in slow motion, the cab swinging around, the trailer continuing its forward momentum, the laws of physics taking over as the massive vehicle lost its battle with inertia. Before they knew what happened, the truck tipped over on its side, stretching across the center lanes, nearly reaching the concrete barriers on either side. Metal screamed against concrete as the trailer scraped along the road's surface, sparks flying as it created a barricade across the bridge. The front 2 cars of the convoy tried to stop, brakes screeching as rubber burned against asphalt, only to slam forcefully into the top of the truck as it slid. Matt slammed on brakes, hoping that the cars behind him did the same. The pedal vibrated under his foot as the anti-lock system engaged, the truck skidding but remaining somewhat controllable. When he realized that he wasn't going to stop in time, he cut the wheel, causing the truck to skid to a stop, hitting the other wrecked cars with the passenger side. The impact was jarring, metal crunching against metal, the seatbelt cutting into his chest as it prevented him from hitting the steering wheel. He looked over towards the other cars, who struggled to stop in time, causing a cascading effect of wrecks. The sound of screeching metal filled the air before falling quiet. Car alarms blared, horns stuck in the on position from damaged electrical systems, and steam rose from ruptured radiators. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and hot metal filled the air. Matt was dazed from the impact, struggling to regain his composure. His ears rang, and a thin trickle of blood ran down the side of his face from where his head had struck the driver's side window. As he sat there, dazed, he looked down the bridge from the direction they came, spotting a mob of zombies racing towards them at an alarming rate. The creatures moved as a wave, more than a dozen strong, drawn by the noise of the crash and the prospect of fresh prey trapped on the bridge with nowhere to run. Chapter 4. Matt's eyes came back into focus, still dazed from the crash, as he stared at the mob closing the distance to the pile of wrecked cars. They were still half a mile away, but running hard. The mass of bodies moved as one, a dark wave flowing across the concrete bridge. The morning sun cast long shadows behind them, making the horde appear even larger and more menacing. A sharp pain throbbed at Matt's temple where his head had struck the window. He reached up, his fingers coming away sticky with blood. The warm wetness trickled down the side of his face, but that was the least of his concerns as he watched the approaching threat. Matt reached down to his seatbelt, trying to undo it, but it was locked into place from the force of the impact. He struggled with it for several seconds, pulling and pressing the release button repeatedly, but the mechanism refused to budge. Panic began to rise in his chest as he realized they were trapped. Beside him, Anthony and Norma began to stir, both of them groaning as they regained consciousness. Anthony's hand went to his head, wincing as his fingers touched a gash above his eyebrow. Norma blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision as she took in their situation. "Are you two all right?" Matt asked, his voice rough with tension as he continued fighting with the stubborn seatbelt. "What the hell happened?" Anthony's words were slightly slurred. "We got into a wreck." Matt's reply was terse, his attention divided between the seatbelt and the approaching zombies. "That explains the headache then." Anthony tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. Anthony looked over to Matt, who recoiled when he saw blood pouring from a cut on his coworker's forehead. The crimson line traced a path down Anthony's face, branching at his eyebrow and continuing down his cheek. Matt quickly shook it off, looking over to Norma, who was feeling just as groggy as he was. The bar owner was blinking rapidly, shaking her head slightly as if to clear it. "Norma, are you with me?" Matt asked, the growing urgency in his voice reflecting the closing distance of the zombie horde. "You better have liability insurance, hotshot." Her voice was dry, but the spark in her eyes told Matt that her wits were intact despite the impact. Matt chuckled, realizing that Norma was just fine. He kept pulling at his seatbelt, trying to get it to unlock, but it wouldn't budge. "Norma, I need your knife. My seatbelt's stuck." The request was calm but urgent. Norma undid her seatbelt with a soft click, the mechanism working smoothly despite the crash. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the knife, handing it over. The weight of it was reassuring in Matt's palm as he flicked it open with urgency, sawing at the nylon strap just above the buckle. "What's wrong, Matt?" Anthony asked, noticing the intensity in his boss's movements as he cut through the restraint. "Look down the bridge." Matt nodded toward the rearview mirror, not pausing in his efforts to free himself. Both Anthony and Norma turned their heads, looking down the bridge from where they came, spotting the horde rushing towards them. "Jesus Christ, we need to get out of here." Anthony's voice cracked, all traces of his earlier pain forgotten in the face of the new threat. "And go where?" Norma's question hung in the air, the reality of their situation sinking in. "The other side of that tractor trailer wouldn't be a bad start." Matt finally cut through his seatbelt, the tension releasing as the strap fell away from his chest. All three of them moved with haste, both Matt and Norma trying their doors, only to find that they're trapped inside the truck. The impact had buckled the frame, jamming the doors shut. Anthony tried his side as well, but it was no better, the door firmly wedged against the side of another vehicle. "I can't get my door open," Norma said, her shoulder aching from the force she'd applied trying to push it open. "Me either." Matt's voice was tight with frustration as he continued to push and pull at his door handle. They continued trying as their attention drifted back towards the horde approaching the edge of the pileup. Within moments, several zombies reached the first car, which had shattered windows and an unconscious driver. The creatures descended on the vehicle, arms reaching through broken glass, hands grasping at the helpless person inside. The trio watched helplessly as the mob feasted on the unsuspecting prey, who thankfully never woke up from the accident. The feeding frenzy was primal and horrific. Blood sprang across shattered glass as the creatures tore into flesh with mindless abandon. Several other people pushed their way out of their cars, trying to escape, only to be overwhelmed by the zombies that swarmed them. Their screams cut through the air, desperate and terrified, before being abruptly silenced as they disappeared beneath a mass of grasping hands and snapping teeth. "We have to move, we have to move." Matt's voice rose with urgency, his eyes scanning the cab for any means of escape. Matt hit the button on his window, amazed when it worked, and it began rolling down. The electric motor whirred, painfully slow in the face of the approaching danger. The car next to him had hit the back end of his truck, leaving a bit of pavement next to him. It wasn't much, but it was their only option. Matt began to pull himself out, contorting his body to fit through the window opening. His shirt caught on the frame and he yanked it free with a tearing sound, not caring about the damage. As his upper body cleared the window, he paused, only to stop when a zombie rushed up to him, nearly grabbing his arm before thrusting both of its arms into the cab of the truck. "The drill! I need the drill!" Matt shouted, pushing himself back inside just enough to avoid the grasping hands. The creature's face pressed against the window frame, teeth snapping inches from Matt's shoulder. Norma looked around for the drill she had brought along from the bar, which had been sent to the floorboard after the wreck. The impact had scattered items throughout the cab, and it took precious seconds to locate the tool amidst the mess. She finally spotted it, half hidden under stacks of paper, and leaned forward to grab it, handing it over with a swift motion. "Here!" she shouted, thrusting the drill into Matt's hand. Matt took the familiar tool, squeezing the trigger while pressing it against the forehead of the creature. The bit spun to life with a high-pitched whine, connecting with the zombie's skull with a wet crunch. The ghoul flailed about, trying to grasp at him, fingers scrabbling against his arms, but Matt persisted, drilling into the creature's brain with grim determination. Blood splattered everywhere, coating the inside of the truck in crimson as the zombie dropped lifeless to the ground. The spray hit Matt in the face, warm and sticky, but he didn't have time to be disgusted. More of the creatures would be coming, drawn by the commotion. "Get in the bed of the truck," Matt shouted, wiping the blood from his eyes with his forearm. Matt climbed out through the window, pulling himself onto the roof before rolling into the truck bed. The metal was hot from the sun, burning against his palms as he scrambled for purchase. He turned immediately, reaching back toward the cab to help the others. Anthony opened up the small window on the back windshield, reaching through for Matt, who grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the bed. The younger man's face was pale beneath the blood, his eyes wide with fear, but he moved with purpose, helping Matt to position himself for Norma's escape. Norma was up next, both men pulling the lighter woman to the relative safety of the truck bed. Her boots scraped against the back window as she wriggled through, cursing fluently under her breath the entire time. As her feet cleared the opening, they flinched when two other zombies raced up to the truck, smacking against it, but the truck was too high off the ground for them to pose much of a threat. Their hands slapped uselessly against the metal, several feet below the edge of the bed. The trio looked down at the ghouls, still trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The creature's movements were both human and inhuman, coordinated enough to run and grab, yet jerky and unnatural in their relentlessness. They snapped out of it when they heard someone calling from the wreckage. "Hey, you in the truck!" The voice was male, strong but tinged with desperation. They looked over to spot a 40-year-old bald man with a mustache that was sticking his head through the sunroof of his sedan. Several zombies were around the car, reaching for him but were just out of reach. His vehicle was wedged between two others, forming a tight triangle that had likely saved his life when the crash occurred. "Are you all right over there?" Matt called out, leaning slightly over the edge of the truck bed to make eye contact with the stranger. Walter stared at Matt incredulously, looking side to side at the zombie hands that were just out of reach, fingers grasping at air inches from his body. His expression spoke volumes about what he thought of Matt's question. "Do I look like I'm all right?" The sarcasm in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Matt thought about it for a moment, dropping his head in embarrassment at the dumb question. The adrenaline and head injury weren't exactly helping his conversational skills. "Yeah, sorry about that. Got my bell rung when we wrecked," Matt offered by way of explanation. "So, that's the excuse you're going with?" Walter raised an eyebrow, somehow managing to maintain his sense of humor despite the dire circumstances. "Yeah, I think I am," Matt nodded, acknowledging the absurdity of their exchange. "Fair enough." Walter almost smiled, the shared moment of normalcy a brief respite from the horror surrounding them. "Can you see anybody else alive over there?" Norma called out, scanning the wreckage for any signs of movement that wasn't a zombie. Walter looked around to the surrounding cars, spotting 3 people trapped in their vehicle, but without a sunroof to escape through. They made eye contact, their silent pleading hitting Walter hard. 2 men and a woman were in a red sedan, her hand pressed against her window, palm flat against the glass, as zombies pounded on the other side. "Yeah, I got 3 people who look like they're all right, but no clue how we're getting to them without some heavy-duty gear." Walter's voice had lost its earlier edge, replaced with genuine concern for the trapped survivors. "What's your name?" "I'm Matt. This is Anthony and Norma." Matt gestured to his companions. The introduction oddly formal given the circumstances, but somehow grounding. "The name's Walter." The man nodded, his mustache twitching slightly as he spoke. "All right, Walter, we need to worry about us before worrying about anybody else," Matt said bluntly. "Well, I'm open to suggestions." Walter gestured to the chaos surrounding them, zombies now filling the spaces between vehicles, prowling for any signs of life they could reach. Matt climbed up onto the roof of his truck, getting the highest vantage point he could manage. The metal dented slightly beneath his weight, groaning in protest after the damage it had sustained in the crash. He turned around to the tractor trailer that had toppled over, mentally judging whether or not he could make the jump up to it. The overturned trailer formed a massive barrier across the bridge, its rectangular form creating what could be a defensible position if they could reach it. It was only a few more feet up, however. It was several feet away from his truck. The gap wasn't huge, but it was enough to make the jump risky, especially with zombies filling the space below. He looked down at Anthony, mentally calculating his weight and strength. "You always make me nervous when you look at me like that, boss." Anthony had noticed Matt's assessment, and his expression showed he didn't like where this was heading. "When have I ever looked at you like this?" Matt tried to sound innocent, but the gears in his head were clearly turning. "You remember that yacht remodel job when one of those dumbasses knocked one of the deck chairs overboard?" Anthony's eyes narrowed with the memory. "Yeah, so?" Matt shrugged, trying to appear casual. "You remember who you dangled off the side of the boat to reach it?" Anthony crossed his arms, giving Matt a pointed look. Matt thought for a second before chuckling, the memory coming back clear as day. "I promise, this is going to be easier." "What are you thinking?" Norma interjected. "I'm thinking we need to get onto the top of that tractor trailer, and boosting him up is the way to do it." Matt pointed to the trailer, then to Anthony, his plan taking shape. "What is getting me up there going to accomplish?" Anthony's skepticism was evident, but there was also resignation in his voice. He knew Matt well enough to understand that once his boss had a plan, they were moving forward with it. Matt smirked before opening up the tool chest on the back of the truck, pulling out a spool of cable. The metal loops gleamed in the sunlight as he uncoiled a length of it, testing its strength with a sharp tug. "We're going to get you up there. You lower this down and we help people climb up," Matt said with confidence. "Where the hell are we getting the people from?" Norma gestured to the trapped survivors, all of whom were surrounded by zombies with no clear path to Matt's truck. Matt held up the drill, giving it a couple of trigger squeezes, a devious grin following. "I got tools, and I intend on using them." Chapter 5. Matt tossed the drill over to Norma before turning around to the tool chest on the back of the truck. He threw open both lids, revealing a treasure trove of goods. Years of construction work had taught him to keep his truck well stocked, a habit that suddenly seemed like divine providence. The morning sun glinted off the neatly organized array of tools inside, each one secured in its proper place despite the chaos of the crash. He rummaged around in there for a moment, pushing aside boxes of nails and spools of wire before pulling out a long-handled hammer, sliding it into his belt loop. The weight of it was reassuring against his hip, solid and dependable. He pulled out a small pouch containing a collection of screwdrivers, the handles worn smooth from years of use, before digging deeper into the container. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, bypassing items that wouldn't help in their current situation. After a few moments, he pulled out another hammer and a collection of metal hooks, handing them over to Anthony, who was confused. The younger man turned the items over in his hands, examining them as if they were foreign objects rather than familiar tools. "What am I supposed to do with these?" Anthony asked, looking from the tools to Matt with raised eyebrows. "When we get you up top, you're going to start securing the line to the top of the truck." Matt gestured toward the overturned tractor trailer, his plan taking shape as he spoke. Anthony began to question it before looking over to the front end of the tractor trailer, spotting a zombified driver belted into the driver's seat. The creature was still strapped in, arms reaching outward as far as the restraint would allow, mouth opening and closing as it tried futilely to reach them. He stared into the mirror at the creature for a few seconds before shaking it off, the reality of their situation hitting home once again. "Yeah, I guess the driver isn't going to mind if we ding up his truck. But wait, if I'm doing that, what are you going to be doing?" Anthony secured the hooks to his belt, the metal clinking against his tools. "We're going to go get Walter and the others." Matt's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing a simple errand rather than a life-threatening rescue operation. "Not to be a fly in your soup or anything, but how are we supposed to get to those people trapped in their cars? He said we'd need heavy machinery, and I don't see any on here." Norma's skepticism was evident, but she maintained her grip on the drill, ready to follow Matt's lead despite her doubts. "We're going to pop off the windshield." Matt didn't wait for Norma to respond, turning and grabbing a giant suction cup out of the tool chest. The rubber disc was nearly a foot in diameter, with a heavy-duty pump handle mounted on the back. "Do I even want to know why you have that?" Norma eyed the device suspiciously, as if it might be used for something unsavory. We have some clients who love big windows, and these come in handy. Matt tested the suction cup's rubber seal with his thumb, satisfied that it remained flexible and undamaged. You ready to get up there? Matt asked, giving Anthony a once-over to make sure he had everything he needed. As ready as I'm ever going to be. Anthony's voice wavered slightly, but his jaw was set with determination. Matt and Norma moved over to the edge of the truck, the two zombies that had been pawing at the side following them around. The creatures' movements were predictable, their single-minded focus making their paths easy to anticipate. The duo worked in unison, striking at the creatures as they approached, Norma with her drill and Matt with his hammer quickly dispatching the two ghouls. The crack of bone and whine of the drill were followed by the soft thud of bodies hitting pavement. Come on, let's move before more of them get over here. Matt wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a smear of dirt and blood across his skin. Matt took a crouching position by the back of the truck, cupping his hands before motioning for Anthony to step into them. His coworker did as intended, placing his work boot in Matt's interlocked fingers. Matt counted silently, synchronizing their movements. Anthony flew through the air, getting both of his arms over the top of the truck. The metal edge bit into his forearms, but adrenaline dulled the pain. He struggled for a moment to get traction, boots scrabbling against the smooth metal side of the trailer, but quickly pulled himself up to the top. Matt waited for him to motion he was ready for the spool of thick wire, which he tossed up to him with a practiced underhand throw. Anthony caught it easily, immediately setting to work examining the trailer for strong points to secure it. Get that secure, because we might be in a hurry when we come back, Matt called up, already turning his attention to the next phase of their plan. You got it, boss. Anthony gave a quick thumbs up before moving toward the front of the trailer, tools in hand. Matt turned back to the problem at hand, zombies congregating around the cars they needed to get to. The creatures moved with singular purpose, pounding on windows and clawing at metal in their efforts to reach the trapped survivors. Norma joined him in looking out at the scene, her expression grim as she assessed the obstacles before them. There was a path for them to take over the tops of wrecked cars. The crash had created an unintended bridge of crumpled metal stretching toward their destination. They looked inside the three cars they would go over, and it was clear that the passengers were either dead or in no condition to make a run for it. Two vehicles contained motionless bodies, necks at impossible angles from the impact. The third held an elderly man, still breathing but unconscious, blood streaming from a gash in his scalp. It ate Matt up inside, knowing he was going to have to leave them behind. But he didn't have a choice. Every second counted, and they couldn't save everyone. The guilt was a weight in his chest, but he pushed it aside, focusing on those they might still help. Okay, Norma, I'm not going to lie to you, this is going to be a bitch. Matt's voice was low, his eyes never leaving the path they would need to take. My first husband said that right before confessing that he was banging one of the waitresses. Norma's reply was dry, almost casual, as if they were having a conversation at her bar rather than planning a dangerous rescue. Norma looked lovingly at the drill, giving the trigger a playful squeeze before getting a smile on her face. Kind of funny how I got to use a drill both times I heard that line. Her smile held no humor, only a grim satisfaction. Matt contemplated her ex-husband's fate for a second before shaking himself back into the moment. Whatever had happened to the man, it clearly hadn't been pleasant. He made a mental note never to get on Norma's bad side. Okay, we're going over those cars, setting up in the truck bed that's just across from Walter. Matt pointed out their route, tracing it with his finger through the air. You lead and I'm following. Norma tightened her grip on the drill, its battery indicator showing a healthy charge. Walter, we're coming to help, but I need you to make noise. Matt called out to the mustached man who was still protruding from his car's sunroof, head and shoulders visible above the vehicle. Why? Walter's face showed confusion, clearly not understanding the strategy. Because I don't want those things coming my way until I'm ready for them. Matt's explanation was terse but clear. The zombies seemed drawn to sound, and they needed to control where the creatures focused their attention. Walter gave him a thumbs up before smacking his hands on the top of the car, a rhythmic pounding that kept the attention of the zombies near him. Matt nodded to Norma and began their perilous journey. The first step was the hardest, moving from the relative safety of the truck bed onto the roof of a sedan. The metal dented beneath his weight, the structure already compromised from the crash. In a matter of seconds, they maneuvered across the tops of the wrecked vehicles, stepping carefully over cracked windshields and crushed roofs. The metal was hot beneath their hands when they needed to steady themselves, the sun having baked the surfaces to uncomfortable temperatures. With a final effort, they jumped down into the truck bed of a pickup that had somehow ended up perpendicular to the flow of traffic. The landing was jarring, sending pain shooting up Matt's legs, but he pushed through it. Matt and Norma walked up to the tailgate, weapons in hand. Walter's car was only a few yards away, nothing but open pavement between them. 5 zombies surrounded his vehicle, drawn by his continued noise-making. They pawed at the sides of the car, oblivious to the rescue team's approach. "Are you ready?" Matt asked, looking to Norma for confirmation. "Let's do it." Her voice was steady, hands firm on the drill. Matt brought the hammer down on the metal tailgate, sending a metallic ping through the air. The sound cut through the ambient noise of moans and distant screams, creating a new focus point for the creatures. Within seconds, all the zombies around Walter's car rushed towards them. The ghouls pawed at them, getting close enough for the duo to strike. Matt cracked skulls with his hammer while Norma drilled into the brains of several creatures. The sound of impact was sickening, a wet crunch that would haunt their dreams if they survived this nightmare. But there was no time for hesitation or squeamishness. Each swing had to count. Each press of the drill trigger had to be precise. As quickly as it had begun, it ended, the ghouls falling quietly onto the ground, lifeless. 5 bodies lay splayed on the pavement, dark fluid pooling beneath their shattered skulls. Matt looked around at the other zombies, 4 creatures swarming the car with the 3 live people inside, while some of the freshly turned ghouls were trapped in the cars, right where they had reanimated, their hands pressed against windows, leaving smears as they tried to reach outside. The closest zombie to Walter was 10 yards away, with a maze of wrecked cars in their way. Matt motioned for Walter to make a run for it, pointing toward their truck where Anthony was visible securing the cable. The bald man climbed out of his sunroof, sliding down the front windshield and getting to the pavement. His feet hit a little harder than he would have liked, the impact causing him to stumble slightly. The noise alerted a couple of the other zombies, their heads swiveling toward the sound with predatory focus. "Damn it!" Walter's curse was low but audible as he tried to regain his balance. "Move, man, move!" Matt's shout was urgent, seeing the creatures already changing direction. Walter tried running, but his leg was injured in the crash. He limped forward, his pace far too slow to outrun the approaching threat. When it looked like he wasn't going to make it, Norma leapt into action, jumping down from the truck bed and running towards the creatures. "Jesus, Norma!" Matt hadn't expected her to move so quickly, the bar owner showing surprising agility for her age. Matt leapt over the tailgate, picking up the pace to catch up to Norma, who rushed the lead zombie. She punched at it with the drill running, catching the creature in the eye and going straight through to the brain. The bit bore through flesh and bone with sickening efficiency, dark fluid spraying as the zombie collapsed. The second ghoul got close, only to be shoulder-checked by Matt. The impact sent the zombie slamming into a car, landing hard on the pavement. Before it could get back up, he delivered a forceful hammer strike to the back of its head, ending the threat. The skull gave way with a crack, the body going instantly limp. "I appreciate that. I promise I'm not always this slow." Walter's breathing was labored, his face pale from pain and exertion. "You better not be." Norma's reply was gruff, but there was concern beneath her brusque exterior. "Get back to my truck and Anthony will pull you up." Matt pointed toward their escape route where Anthony was visible at the edge of the trailer, wire in hand. Walter nodded and scurried off toward safety, his limp still pronounced but his pace quickened by fear and adrenaline. Norma and Matt looked over to the other car, where 2 zombies remained, still focused on the trapped survivors inside. The creatures pounded on the windows with mindless determination, unaware of the threat approaching from behind. "How you want to play it?" Norma wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a dark smear across her forehead. "I think we can circle around so their backs are to us." Matt pointed to a path that would allow them to approach unseen, using the wrecked vehicles as cover. "Lead the way, hotshot." Norma's grin was fierce, the drill still gripped tightly in her hand. Matt smirked at Norma before leading them as quietly as he could around the wreckage, using it as cover. They ducked behind crumpled hoods and shattered trunks, moving from one vehicle to the next. The duo snuck up on the creatures, darting at the final moment to deliver the kill strikes with their respective weapons. Matt's hammer connected with the back of one zombie's skull, the impact driving it to its knees before a second blow finished the job. Norma's drill whirred into the base of another creature's skull, the bit tearing through bone and brain tissue with brutal efficiency. As soon as they were down, Matt pulled on the driver's side door, the only one they had access to, as the other was fused with another car in the impact. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't get it to budge. The frame had warped in the crash, the door effectively welded shut by the force. He looked inside the car, spotting 3 people, 2 men and a woman in the back seat, who were terrified. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear and desperate hope as they saw potential rescuers. One of the men in the front passenger seat had blood streaming from a cut on his cheek, but all 3 appeared to be conscious and alert. "Don't worry, I'm going to get you out. Just hang on." Matt's voice was calm, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. Matt jumped onto the hood of the car, securing the large suction cup to the middle of the glass. The rubber formed a tight seal against the smooth surface as he pumped the handle, creating the vacuum needed for a solid grip. Once attached, he pulled out screwdrivers, shoving them into the gap between the windshield and the car. The tools slid into the narrow space, meeting resistance as they encountered the rubber seal that kept the glass in place. It was taking him a few moments to get it right, struggling a bit to free it as he worked the screwdrivers around the perimeter of the windshield. "You gotta hurry, Matt." Norma's voice was tense, her attention focused on something in the distance. "What is it?" Matt didn't look up from his work, continuing to pry at the windshield with methodical movements. "Company." The single word carried enough weight to make Matt pause. Matt looked up towards the far end of the bridge, spotting another dozen zombies racing towards them. They were still a few hundred yards away, but it wasn't going to be long before they were on them. Matt looked into the car, yelling at the top of his lungs, his voice carrying the urgency of their situation. "Get ready to run for it." Chapter 6. Matt worked at a frenzied pace, knowing that time wasn't on his side. The approaching zombies were drawing closer with each passing second, their moans carrying across the bridge. Sweat dripped into his eyes, stinging as he blinked it away, but he didn't dare pause to wipe his brow. He slammed a couple more screwdrivers into the gap between the windshield and car, running them along the edges to free the glass from its rubber seal. The tools made a harsh scraping sound as they cut through years of accumulated grime and weatherproofing. Inside the car, the trapped passengers watched with desperate hope, hands pressed against the glass as if they could physically will it to come loose. Finally, he knew he had to move, grabbing the suction cup and pulling with everything he could muster. The muscles in his back and shoulders strained under the effort, veins standing out on his forearms as he applied maximum force. The 2 men in the front seat pushed as well, their palms flattened against the inside of the windshield, helping to free it. For a moment, nothing happened, the glass refusing to budge despite their combined efforts. Then, with a sudden popping sound, the seal gave way. The windshield came free all at once, catching Matt off guard with its sudden release. Matt stumbled backwards, barely catching himself before falling to the ground. His boots skidded on the hood, arms pinwheeling for balance as he fought to stay upright. The windshield was heavier than it looked, and he grunted with the effort of controlling it. He threw the windshield to the side, the glass shattering against the pavement with a sound like chimes. Without pausing to catch his breath, he reached down and grabbed the 2 men by the hands and pulling them out. The first man came easily, scrambling through the opening with desperate energy. The second followed immediately after, his shirt catching momentarily on a jagged edge of the frame before tearing free. "Come on, girl, we gotta move." Matt extended his hand toward the young woman in the back seat, urgency making his voice rough. The young woman in the back screamed out as she moved, realizing she was more injured than she thought. Her face contorted in pain as she tried to pull herself forward, one arm wrapped protectively around her midsection. Matt reached in, grabbing her arms and pulling, causing her more pain. Her cry cut through the air, making him wince with sympathy, but he couldn't afford to be gentle. Matt looked down the bridge, seeing zombies racing towards them, now within 50 yards. The creatures moved like lightning, their arms pumping as they closed the distance. Their faces were fixed in expressions of mindless hunger, mouths open, teeth bared. He turned back to the others. "Get back to the truck, now." The command left no room for questions or hesitation. The men and Norma nodded, turning and hightailing it, despite leaving their friend behind. Matt's tone left little room to argue. They scrambled away, dodging between wrecked vehicles, Norma taking point with her drill still at the ready. Matt looked at the young woman who was clutching her chest, most likely several broken ribs. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line as she tried to manage the pain. She couldn't have been more than 25, with short dark hair and wide brown eyes now bright with tears. "I'm sorry, this is going to hurt like hell." His voice softened slightly, genuine apology in his tone. The woman nodded as Matt picked her up, one arm behind her back, the other under her knees. The movement triggered another scream in pain as a result. Her body went rigid in his arms, back arching as the agony of movement hit her. He turned and began running back towards his truck, however. He didn't have the free hands to vault himself up on top of the line of wrecked vehicles he went over earlier. The path he and Norma had taken to reach the trapped survivors was no longer viable, not while carrying an injured woman. Matt muttered obscenities under his breath as he kept moving through the wreckage with the injured woman in tow. She whimpered with every movement, but kept it quiet, not wanting to yell in his ear. The zombies continued closing the gap, moaning and bouncing off the wrecked cars as their agility was impaired. They weren't graceful, but they were relentless, recovering quickly from collisions that would have stopped or injured a normal person. They got within 10 yards of Matt as he reached the back of his truck, the others already ascending to the top of the tractor trailer. Anthony had secured the cable, creating a crude but effective climbing rope that the survivors were using to pull themselves up. Walter went first, his injured leg making the climb awkward but manageable. The two men from the car followed, helping each other as they scrambled up the metal side of the overturned trailer. Matt dumped the young woman into the back of the truck, causing her to yell out in pain as she hit. The metal bed was hot from the sun, but that was the least of her concerns as the impact jarred her injured ribs. Matt wasn't proud of the rough handling, but there was no time for gentleness. He wasted no time in leaping up, vaulting over the side, landing hard inside the truck beside her. His boots hit the metal with a hollow thud, the impact traveling up his legs and into his spine. He dropped to a crouch, positioning himself between the injured woman and the approaching threat. He covered her head as the zombies arrived, slamming into the truck, reaching out but not getting close to them. The entire vehicle shook with the impact, the creature's hands slapping against the metal with hollow thuds. "Are you okay?" Matt asked. "Yeah, I think so." The girl's voice was strained, each word clearly an effort. "Just lay here and breathe deeply. It'll help with the pain." Matt gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze before moving away. The girl nodded as Matt pulled himself up to his feet, looking to the top of the tractor trailer where everybody else stood. They peered down at him, concern on their faces as they watched the zombies surrounding the truck. "Nice moves out there," Norma called down, giving him a mock salute. "I played a little ball back in high school," Matt grinned up at her, the familiar banter somehow comforting amid the madness. "I can see that. If you weren't married, I'd ask you to break out that Letterman's jacket for me." Norma's eyes twinkled with mischief. Matt chuckled, shaking his head at Norma's inappropriateness. The woman had a talent for lightening the mood, even when surrounded by the walking dead. "So how are we getting you up here, boss?" Anthony leaned over the edge, concern evident in his voice. "We're going to give her a few minutes to rest up, then I'm going to boost her up and over like I did for you." Matt looked down at the young woman, who was still focused on controlling her breathing. Anthony looked straight down, seeing a handful of creatures in the slight gap between the tractor trailer and the truck bed. The zombies were wedged into the narrow space, reaching upward with outstretched arms, but unable to climb the sheer metal sides. Their faces were turned upward, vacant eyes fixed on the survivors above. "Do you think you can get her this far over?" Anthony's doubt was clear in his voice. "Hey, I got her this far, didn't I?" Matt's confidence was partly bravado, but he needed the others to believe they could make it. Doubt was as dangerous as the creatures surrounding them. Anthony nodded, not wanting to press his boss further. He moved back from the edge, joining the others who were watching the growing horde of zombies filling the bridge behind them. Matt took a few deep breaths, looking down at the zombies that were reaching up for him. He spotted one particularly tall one by the side of the truck, one that would be a problem if it moved to the back. Its height gave it an advantage, arms nearly reaching the top of the truck bed. If it repositioned itself, it might be able to grab them. "Come here, big boy. Let me get a look at that skull." Matt's voice was almost conversational as he addressed the creature. Matt pulled his hammer out, reaching over and delivering a headshot to the creature. The hammer connected with a wet crunch, the zombie's skull giving way under the impact. One strike and it was down for the count, joining the growing number of bodies surrounding the truck. The young girl moaned a bit as she sat up, panic setting in a little bit as she saw zombie hands all around her, just out of reach. Her eyes darted from side to side, taking in the creatures that surrounded them. Her breathing quickened, the fear momentarily overwhelming the pain of her injuries. "It's okay, they can't get to you." Matt crouched beside her, his voice calm and reassuring. The girl took a few deep breaths to calm herself down before Matt helped her to her feet. She winced as she stood, one arm still wrapped around her midsection, the other gripping Matt's forearm for support. Her legs were unsteady, but she managed to stay upright with his help. "You're going to be okay, I promise." "But," Matt trailed off, not sure how to phrase it. "But what?" The girl looked up at him, apprehension in her eyes. "But I'm going to have to throw you over to them." He nodded toward the group on top of the trailer, watching for her reaction. The girl's eyes went wide, looking up at the others before looking down at the zombies. The gap between the truck and the trailer suddenly seemed impossibly wide, the drop to the zombie-filled space below a nightmare scenario. She began to shake her head, freaked out, but Matt put his hands on her shoulders, stroking them softly in a calming manner. "I just need you to trust me. I didn't make that run with you in my arms to let you down now." His eyes held hers, silently willing her to believe him. The girl thought about it for a moment before nodding. Matt moved swiftly, taking a knee near the back of the truck, hands cupped. He didn't want to give her a chance to back out. Every second of hesitation increased the risk that she would change her mind, and they didn't have time for that luxury. "Step in my hand and jump when I lift." His instructions were clear and direct. The girl did as instructed, placing her foot in his interlaced fingers. She was lighter than Anthony had been, but her injured ribs made the positioning awkward. She grimaced as she prepared herself, drawing a deep breath despite the pain it caused. With a synchronized movement, she leapt up as Matt pushed. She flew skyward, getting caught by her two friends and pulled safely to the top. Her scream of pain as they grabbed her under the arms was cut short as they pulled her onto the flat surface of the trailer, safely away from the edge. Matt stepped all the way back against the cab of his truck, waiting on the guys up top to get back into position. The young woman was safely with the others now, but Matt himself was still trapped on the truck, surrounded by zombies. He needed height and distance to clear the gap, and that meant a running start. With a nod from the men above, he pushed off, gaining as much speed as he could in the limited space of the truck bed. 3 steps, that was all he had, but he made them count, driving forward with everything he had. His foot hit the side of the truck bed at exactly the right angle, and he pushed off with everything he could muster. For a moment, he was airborne, sailing over the zombies below. Time seemed to slow as he hung suspended between safety and death. But despite his effort, he wasn't getting high enough for the top of the tractor trailer. The edge was still a foot beyond his reach, and gravity was asserting its relentless pull. Much to his relief, the 2 men grabbed his outstretched arms, catching him mid-fall. Their grip was strong, hands locked around his wrists as they prevented him from dropping into the mass of zombies below. He looked down at the creatures who were grasping at his boots, their fingers inches from catching his dangling feet. He kicked off the side of the tractor trailer as they pulled him up, using the momentum to help them haul him to safety. All 3 of them collapsed on the top, out of breath. Matt's chest heaved as he gulped in air, the exertion and close call leaving him momentarily speechless. "I appreciate that assist, boys," Matt finally managed, looking at the 2 men who had saved him. "I figured we owed you one." The taller of the 2 men nodded, still breathing heavily from the effort of pulling Matt up. Norma stepped over, giving Matt a playful kick on the thigh. "Don't you get comfortable, because I don't think this plan is going how you hoped." Matt let out a deep sigh as he pulled himself up to his feet. His muscles protested the movement, already stiffening from the repeated exertions and impacts. He looked out to the Outer Banks side of the bridge, staring in disbelief. A handful of cars were wrecked against the tractor-trailer, and dozens of zombies roamed around, with more in the distance, just waiting on a reason to run towards them. The bridge stretched out before them, supposed to be their escape route, now a corridor of death, filled with wandering creatures. Some were still in their vehicles, trapped where they had turned. Others moved in small groups, seemingly drawn to any movement or sound. Matt shook his head, dropping it down. I really should have called in sick today. Chapter 7. Matt stared out at the carnage on both sides of the tractor-trailer, his mind reeling. The morning sun illuminated a scene of devastation that stretched the length of the bridge in both directions. What had been an ordinary commute half an hour ago was now a nightmare landscape of twisted metal and wandering dead. A handful of creatures trapped in cars, bitten after the accidents while still in their seatbelts. He could see them through windshields, thrashing against restraints that had once saved their lives but now kept them imprisoned. Other zombies roamed free, ready to pounce at a moment's notice. They moved between the wrecked vehicles, sometimes pausing to pound against windows where survivors might still be hiding, other times simply wandering aimlessly until some sound or movement caught their attention. So how are we getting out of this one? Norma's voice broke through his thoughts, the bar owner peering over the edge of the trailer at the zombies circling below. Still working on that. Matt's reply was automatic, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any option he might have missed. The reality was grim. Zombies on both sides, water below, and 7 people with no supplies or transportation. One of the men rescued from the car, Keith, got up from the other 2, who were off towards the front of the tractor-trailer and away from the others. He was young, maybe early 20s, with close-cropped hair and the build of someone who spent time at the gym. He approached Matt with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty in his expression. "Hey, I'm guessing that you're the one in charge here?" Keith's question wasn't challenging, simply seeking confirmation of what seemed obvious to everyone. Matt looked up to Keith, who was staring down at him. Norma, Anthony, and Walter looked down at him as well, their faces expectant, waiting for his response. The weight of their gazes prompted a chuckle on his part. Somehow, without discussion or vote, he had become the leader of their little group of survivors. "It would appear so. The name's Matt." He extended his hand, which Keith shook firmly. "I'm Keith. Thank you for what you did back there." The gratitude in his voice was genuine, his eyes darting briefly to his friends huddled at the front of the trailer. "It's my pleasure, kid. I don't think my wife would have forgiven me if I had left you behind," Matt replied. Keith looked over to Norma with a grateful nod, apparently assuming she was Matt's wife based on their rapport. Norma broke into laughter, unable to contain herself. "Oh, I wish, honey, but I would break that man in half." Her eyes twinkled with mischief as she looked Keith up and down appraisingly. Matt laughed and shook his head, standing back up. The metal surface of the trailer was hot beneath his palms as he pushed himself to his feet, the sun continuing to beat down on them. "So, getting back on topic before things get too out of control up here, what's on your mind?" Matt asked. "Do you know what's going on? Because we can't reach the police or anybody." Keith pulled out his cell phone to illustrate the point. "I have no clue, but..." Matt gestured broadly around them, taking in the devastation that stretched as far as they could see in either direction. "I don't think any of it is good." The understatement hung in the air between them for a moment before the conversation continued. "But the police or the military or somebody's coming, right?" Keith's voice took on a pleading quality, desperation creeping in at the edges. Matt could hear the panic in Keith's tone, and while he'd like to reassure the kid, he knew he couldn't. False hope would only make things worse when reality inevitably set in. "I honestly don't know, Keith. All I know is I'm not going to wait around here to find out." Matt's voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. "You got an idea, boss?" Anthony stepped forward, adjusting his tool belt out of habit. The familiar weight of it was comforting, a reminder of normal life that seemed increasingly distant. "Yeah, but you're not going to like it." Matt walked over to the edge of the tractor-trailer, which was nearly touching the protective barrier of the bridge. The concrete wall was only about 2 feet wide, designed to prevent vehicles from going over the edge in case of accidents. He looked down at the choppy water below, calculating the distance. It had to be at least 30 feet to the surface, maybe more. Not a fatal drop if done correctly, but certainly risky. His eyes followed the expanse of water to the shore, pointing to land half a mile away. The distance seemed both impossibly far and their only hope of escape. "Oh, you have got to be shitting me, boss." Anthony's face paled as he realized what Matt was suggesting. "Do you have a better idea?" Matt turned to face the group, his expression challenging anyone to offer an alternative. "Yeah, we could," Anthony trailed off as if he was running through every idea he could imagine and shooting them down in his mind. His shoulders slumped slightly as he came to the same conclusion Matt had already reached. "Well, no, I guess I don't." "Norma?" Matt turned to the bar owner, who was studying the water with a thoughtful expression. "I get to see you in a wet t-shirt? I'm in." Norma's irreverent humor drew a surprised laugh from Walter, the tension momentarily broken. Matt shook his head while chuckling, turning to the others. "Walter?" The bald man scratched his mustache thoughtfully, assessing the distance to shore with a critical eye. "I'm not the greatest swimmer, but I think I got it in me to make it across." "Keith, what about you and your friends?" Keith's face went pale, knowing the answer without even having to ask his friends. He glanced back at the young woman, who was still clearly in pain from her injured ribs, and the other man, who was sitting with his knees drawn up to his chest, staring blankly at the metal surface of the trailer. "He can't swim, and with her injury, I don't think she can either." Keith's voice was resigned, the decision already made for him by circumstance. Matt looked around to the others, who subtly shook their heads, answering his silent question about who could help her get to shore. None of them were strong enough swimmers to support someone else across that distance. He knew he was a lot of things, but a great swimmer wasn't one of them. The idea of trying to keep another person afloat while fighting current and exhaustion was a death sentence for both of them. "If you don't want to come with us, I can respect that. But we can't sit up here and wait to die." Matt gestured to the zombies below, their numbers steadily increasing as more were drawn by the commotion of their escape. "Hey man, you got us out of that car, you've done enough in my book." Keith's response was understanding, without resentment. He knew as well as Matt did that their options were limited. "For what it's worth, if we find help, we'll let them know you're here." Matt held Keith's gaze, the promise sincere, despite the odds against them finding anyone who could or would help. Keith nodded before walking back over to his friends, who were still nursing their injuries in shock. Walter stepped up beside Matt, his voice low enough that only Matt could hear. "You know they're going to die up here if we leave them, right?" The statement wasn't accusatory, simply acknowledging the harsh reality they faced. "Two of them can't swim, and the more I look at the distance, I'm not convinced I'm going to make it just focusing on me. It's not ideal, but I think it's best for everybody if they stay." Matt's voice was tight with suppressed emotion. The decision weighed on him, but he couldn't see an alternative that didn't risk everyone's lives. Walter tried to formulate a response, but in his heart he knew Matt was right. Sometimes survival meant making impossible choices. He simply nodded, a gesture of understanding rather than agreement. "Okay, we need to get moving." Matt turned to Anthony and Norma, who had been giving them space for the difficult conversation. "No time to catch our breath?" Anthony asked, only half joking. "Look around, Anthony. Whoever those people kill gets back up and starts killing. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to get out here." Matt's voice was urgent, his gaze sweeping over the bridge, where more zombies seemed to appear with each passing minute. Matt turned his attention towards the water, as if he was trying to psych himself up. The distance to shore seemed to grow with each passing second, his confidence in their plan wavering. Before he could go, Norma spoke loudly and forcefully, her voice cutting through his doubts. "Okay, listen up. That fall is gonna hurt like a motherfucker, but it's nothing compared to the shock that cold water is gonna jolt into your system." Norma's tone was authoritative, someone who knew what she was talking about. The three men stared at her, following along while watching her take off her shoes, tying the laces together. The practiced movement suggested this wasn't her first rodeo. "Now, get your boots off and tie them off. They'll sink you if you go in with them on your feet, so you're going to want them in your hands. When you come up for air, throw them over your shoulder and start paddling." She slung her own shoes over her shoulder, demonstrating the technique. The three men gave Norma curious looks, wondering how she knew all this. She caught their expressions and rolled her eyes, hands on hips in a posture of mock offense. What? It's not my fault I've lived my life like a badass. This isn't my first time jumping off this bridge. She seemed almost proud of the admission, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Why in the world would you jump off the bridge? Anthony's face was a study in confusion as he bent to untie his work boots. Norma shrugged, the gesture dismissive. Hey, $50 is $50. Plus, it's one less thing on my bucket list. Now, are we doing this, or what? The three men shrugged at each other, following Norma's lead and taking off their shoes. Matt's boots were well worn, the leather soft from years of use. He tied the laces together carefully, making sure the knot was secure. Once they were ready, they prepared for the leap. Matt looked back to Keith and the others, giving them a nod, receiving a friendly good luck wave in response. The unspoken understanding passed between them. This might be the last time they saw each other. Keith would do what he could for his friends, and Matt would try to send help if possible. Beyond that, each group was on their own. Okay, let's do this before I lose my nerve. Matt took a deep breath, moving to the edge of the trailer. The water seemed impossibly far below, the current visible even from this height. You'll be fine, hotshot, just follow my lead. Norma's confidence was reassuring, her earlier playfulness replaced by determination. Norma took off towards the edge, building speed with each step across the metal surface. Her legs pumped with surprising strength for a woman her age, and she leaped off with everything she had, clearing the side of the bridge with ease. For a moment, she hung suspended in the air, silhouetted against the blue sky, before gravity took over. A few seconds later, she splashed down below, the impact creating a white froth on the water's surface. She disappeared briefly before bobbing back up, waving an arm to signal she was okay. The men exchanged glances, a mixture of admiration and trepidation on their faces. Norma had made it look easy, but none of them were eager to follow. Finally, Anthony shrugged, a look of what the hell crossing his features. See you down there, boss. Anthony backed up several steps, then ran forward, launching himself off the edge with a yell that was part fear, part exhilaration. Walter was next, his approach more cautious, but his leap no less committed. His mustache fluttered in the wind as he fell, arms pinwheeling slightly before he straightened out for impact. With a shrug, Matt followed the others over the edge. The shock of the impact knocked the breath from Matt's lungs, the cold water seizing his muscles in its icy grip. For a terrifying moment, he sank beneath the surface, the world muffled and dark. Training and instinct took over, his arms and legs working to propel him back to the surface. He broke through with a gasp, gulping air greedily as he treaded water. His wet clothes dragged at him, heavy and cumbersome, but he managed to stay afloat. He looked over at Norma, who was grinning from ear to ear, apparently enjoying the adventure despite the circumstances. Her hair was plastered to her scalp, water dripping from her face, but she looked more alive than ever. That's some solid form there. Now come on, let's get moving. That shore ain't getting any closer. Chapter 8. Matt, Norma, Walter, and Anthony swam for what felt like an eternity. Every muscle burned from overuse, but they pushed on, eventually reaching the shore. The cold water had sapped their strength, each stroke becoming more difficult than the last as their waterlogged clothes dragged them down. The bridge gradually grew smaller behind them, the distance seeming to stretch endlessly as they fought the current. Matt was first out of the water, taking a couple of steps before collapsing on the rocky shoreline, his breath ragged. Small pebbles dug into his palms and knees as he crawled fully onto land, beyond the reach of the lapping waves. The others followed, mimicking his movements as they struggled onto the shore. Norma emerged from the water with surprising grace despite her exhaustion, while Anthony and Walter practically dragged themselves onto the rocks. "Boss, I love you, but that was a terrible idea," Anthony gasped, rolling onto his back and staring up at the sky. "Yeah, I started doubting myself about halfway across the water," Matt admitted, coughing as he tried to catch his breath. His arms trembled from the exertion, muscles protesting every movement. "Will you two stop whining? You crossed off a bucket list item, you should be proud," Norma said, wringing water from her hair. No offense, Norma, but normal people don't have jumping off a bridge on their bucket list, Anthony replied, raising himself up on his elbows to look at her. Like I said, you crossed that off of your list, Norma shot back, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Anthony thought about the backhanded insult for a moment before chuckling, which caused his chest muscles to hurt. He winced, rubbing at his sternum with a grimace. So, where do we go now? Walter asked, sitting up and surveying their surroundings. His injured leg was stretched out awkwardly before him, the effort of the swim having further aggravated the damage. Matt sat up, looking over to the bridge, which was a few hundred yards away. Even from that distance, they could see frenzied movement on it. Dark shapes moved erratically across the concrete span, the structure now a corridor of death they had narrowly escaped. Well, we ain't going that way, that's for sure, Walter said, watching the distant chaos with a mixture of relief and dread. We're going to have to cut across the wetland. The highway shouldn't be too far. Norma pointed inland, where tall reeds and marsh grass grew in thick clumps. Highway? Isn't that dangerous? Walter asked. It's not that bad. The highway runs parallel with the main strip. There's another stretch of wetland before you get to houses and businesses. We should be all right, Matt explained, pushing himself to his feet. His legs wobbled slightly, still weak from the exertion of the swim. Or as all right as we can be in this situation, Anthony added, standing up and attempting to wring water from his soaked shirt. Matt snapped his fingers and pointed to his younger co-worker, acknowledging that he's right. Well, shake a leg, let's get moving. Norma was already walking toward the wetlands, her wet clothes clinging to her frame. The three men let out defeated sighs as they pulled themselves back to their feet. Their shoes carried across the swim were soaked through despite their best efforts to keep them dry. Each step squelched unpleasantly as they followed Norma toward the marsh. The four of them started pushing through the wetlands, thick plant life making it difficult to see what was ahead of them. Reeds and cattails grew densely, obscuring their vision and slowing their progress. The ground was soft underfoot, sometimes giving way to ankle-deep water that made walking a challenge. They moved slow, the sluggish conditions making it difficult. Walter struggled the most, his injured leg causing him to lag behind as they pushed through the dense vegetation. Several minutes later, however, they spotted the highway. Matt held up his fist, getting everyone to stop moving. The others froze immediately, sensing the caution in his posture. He inched forward, alone, wanting to scope out the road before they pushed onto it. He poked his head out from behind cover, spotting a wrecked car 50 yards down the road, a smattering of zombies trying to break into it. The creatures pounded on the windows and rocked the vehicle in their attempts to reach whatever was inside. The car itself was crumpled against the guardrail, steam still rising from the damaged hood. Matt motioned for the others to move up slowly, which they did. They crouched low, using the ditch and tall grasses for cover as they approached his position. Once they were close, he spoke in hushed tones. There's a handful of those things just up the road, but they're focused on a car, Nat whispered, nodding in the direction of the wreck. Should we help the people inside? Anthony asked, peering cautiously over the vegetation. Matt poked his head out from behind cover again, trying to see if the driver was alive or dead. While he couldn't get a clear view, he saw blood on the windshield, a dark spray pattern across the cracked glass. I don't see anybody, Matt replied grimly, ducking back down. So what do we do then? Walter asked, his face pale beneath the spatter of mud from their trek through the wetland. When I give the signal, we're moving quickly across the road, Matt said. Before they could respond, the sound of a horn blared nearby. The sudden noise made them all flinch, instinctively pressing lower to the ground. Matt poked his head out from cover, spotting a pickup truck barreling down the road. The driver laid on the horn, drawing one of the zombies away from the broken-down car. The creature turned toward the sound, arms outstretched as it staggered into the path of the oncoming vehicle. The truck driver swerved, smacking the creature with the front bumper, sending it flying off the road, splashing down in the wetland area not far from where they were hidden. Without thinking, Matt broke from cover, waving his arms frantically, hoping to get the driver to stop. The pickup truck was their best chance at getting away quickly. But rather than slowing, the driver increased his speed, flipping Matt off as he blew by. You asshole! Matt shouted after the retreating vehicle, frustration evident in his voice. Matt flipped the driver off before turning around towards the zombies, who were now rushing towards them at an alarming rate. By the time he noticed them, they were within 20 yards, closing fast. "Run!" Matt's command was sharp, his arm sweeping toward the other side of the road. Matt motioned for the others to run, standing his ground in the road for a moment while they caught up to him. He pulled out his hammer, readying it to fight, only to have two of the zombies adjust course towards the side of the road, veering away from him toward easier prey. Norma and Anthony got up to Matt in the center of the road, all of them looking back to Walter, who was struggling to get out of the wetland. His injured leg slowed him considerably, and he was only halfway up the embankment when the zombies reached him. Before they knew what happened, the two zombies pounced on top of him. The attack was brutal in its efficiency, the creatures driven by mindless hunger. They fell upon Walter with terrible force, knocking him backward into the marsh grass. Walter let out a scream as the creatures ripped at his flesh. The sound was filled with terror and agony, piercing the air. "Jesus Christ!" Anthony lunged back towards Walter, only to be grabbed by the hand by Norma and dragged towards the other side of the road. "No, let me go! We have to help him!" Anthony struggled against Norma's grip, but she pulled him firmly away from the scene. Matt stepped up, taking on the other zombie that was within a few yards of him. With a forceful strike, he cracked the creature over the head with his hammer. The ghoul crumpled, like flipping off a switch, the skull giving way under the impact. Matt looked back at Walter, whose thrashing about had slowed. The man's struggles were weakening, his screams fading as the zombies continued their attack. Matt muttered obscenities under his breath before turning and joining the other two at the other side of the road, pushing on. There was nothing he could do for Walter now. Staying would only put the rest of them at risk. The guilt weighed on him even as he fled, another name added to the growing list of those he couldn't save. Chapter 9. Matt, Anthony, and Norma pushed on through the wetlands, doing their best to ignore the thoughts about poor Walter. The image of him being torn apart by the zombies was still fresh in their minds, his screams echoing in their memories. They did, however, keep their ears open for the potential those zombies would pursue them, constantly glancing over their shoulders as they waded through the marsh. The thick vegetation made progress difficult, their waterlogged clothes adding to the burden. Each step was a struggle against the soft, uneven ground, but fear kept them moving forward. Matt led the way, using his hammer to push aside the dense reeds that blocked their path. Behind him, Anthony moved with uncharacteristic silence, his usual banter silenced by the shock of Walter's death. Norma brought up the rear, occasionally stopping to listen for sounds of pursuit, her face set in a grim expression. Water sloshed around their ankles, sometimes deeper where unseen channels cut through the marsh. Insects buzzed around them, drawn to their sweat and the lingering scent of salt water that clung to their clothes. It took several minutes for them to get over to the main street, buildings emerging from behind brush. The transition from wetland to suburban landscape was abrupt, marsh grass giving way to manicured lawns and concrete as they approached the edge of the developed area. The sight of civilization should have been comforting, but after what they had witnessed, it only served to heighten their caution. The three of them took a knee behind cover at the edge of the wetland, about 10 yards away from the highway. Across the street sat a strip mall, which appeared to be under siege. Several cars were abandoned, blood pooling in the parking lot along with a few bodies laying motionless. Some appeared to have been struck by vehicles, others showed the telltale signs of zombie attacks, torn flesh and missing limbs. Throngs of creatures pressed up against several storefronts, desperate to get inside. Their persistent pounding created a dull, rhythmic backdrop to the otherwise eerily quiet scene. "Jesus Christ," Anthony whispered, his voice barely audible. The strip mall contained a grocery store, a pharmacy, and several smaller businesses. Through the windows they could see movement inside some of the shops, people who had managed to barricade themselves when the apocalypse began. The zombies focused their attention on these locations, drawn by the prospect of fresh prey. "You're going to have to pull another rabbit out of your hat, hotshot," Norma said, nudging Matt with her elbow. Matt stared out, trying to figure out what to do. With the number of zombies and their only weapon being the hammer he had in his hand, it would be impossible for them to get into a store. Even if they could break through the line of creatures, The noise would only draw more to their location. They needed another option, and quickly. Matt poked his head out a little further, trying to get a sense of the situation on the highway itself. For the most part, it was empty. A few wrecked cars scattered about, along with a smattering of zombies moving around. They shuffled aimlessly, occasionally investigating abandoned vehicles or pausing to tear at what might once have been a person. Matt shook his head, doubting he had the answers to their problems. The weight of leadership pressed down on him, made heavier by Walter's death. If he had formulated a better plan, moved faster, perhaps their friend would still be alive. He continued shaking his head, lost in a spiral of doubt and recrimination. After a few shakes, Norma smacked him across the face, pointing her finger at him. "You stop that bullshit right now, you hear me? You got us this far, now get us the rest of the way," she hissed, her eyes fierce with determination. Norma's tone, despite being low in volume, carried a lot of weight. In that moment, Matt feared Norma more than the creatures that wanted to rip the flesh from his bones. Her intensity cut through his self-doubt, bringing him back to the present and the immediate need for action. He nodded, turning around again to look for a solution. It only took a few seconds for his gaze to fall upon an abandoned police car sitting in the middle of the strip mall parking lot. The driver's side door was wide open, engine appearing to still be running, judging by the faint exhaust visible in the air. He pointed to it, his finger steady despite the tremor he felt inside. "There's our ride out of here," Matt said, a new determination in his voice. "You want to steal a police car?" Anthony's eyes widened, his moral compass still functioning despite the apocalyptic circumstances. Norma let out a chuckle, patting Matt on the back with surprising vigor. "I knew you had a wild streak in you." "Again, you want to steal a police car?" Anthony repeated, looking from Matt to Norma in disbelief. "To be fair, I don't think he's using it anymore," Matt replied. Matt pointed to one of the storefronts to the left of the car, and a zombie dressed in a bloody and tattered police uniform. The officer's uniform was torn open at the chest, revealing a gaping wound that had likely been the cause of death. "I like the idea, but talk about threading the needle," Norma observed, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the risk. Matt knew she was right, looking back at their potential escape vehicle. Zombies were on both sides of the car, not 15 yards away at the storefronts. While they were occupied at the moment, the slightest sound would bring them running. Their window of opportunity was narrow and closing with every passing second. "We move fast, stay low, and approach the car from behind," Matt outlined, his voice steady despite the danger. "And everybody in the front seat, because those back doors don't open from the inside," Norma added, a surprising bit of knowledge that made both men look at her with raised eyebrows. Matt smirked at Norma's suggestion, wondering yet again about the bar owner's colorful past. "What is it?" she asked, noticing his expression. "When we get someplace safe, you'll have to tell us how you know that," Matt replied, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Come on, let's move before another asshole drives by and lets the world know we're here," Matt said, readying himself for action. Matt led them out from cover, the trio filing into a straight line, following the leader. The transition from the wetland to the open road left them feeling exposed, vulnerable. They moved in a crouch, trying to present as small a target as possible while maintaining speed. They raced across the highway, Matt noticing out of the corner of his eye that a few zombies down the street noticed them. The ghouls were 50 yards away, but would be a problem if they didn't hurry. Matt picked up the pace, getting to the parking lot and keeping them moving. The pavement felt strange beneath their feet after the soft ground of the marsh, the solid surface allowing them to move more quickly. The trio lined up with the back of the police car that was 15 yards away, but their speed caused their footfalls to be louder than intended. A handful of zombies on either side of the police car turned around at the sudden sound. The ghouls moaned in excitement before racing towards them, their arms outstretched, mouths open in mindless hunger. They closed the distance with alarming speed. "Run!" Matt shouted, abandoning any pretense of stealth. Matt sprinted forward towards the car, knowing that their cover was blown and their window was closing. The three of them managed to get to the car a couple of seconds before the zombies, the sound of their footsteps seeming to echo across the parking lot. Matt jumped into the driver's side, slamming the door with enough force to rock the entire vehicle. Anthony threw open the passenger door, jumping in before pulling Norma onto his lap. The close quarters were awkward, but necessity overrode discomfort as the first of the zombies reached the car. Anthony grabbed the door to pull it shut, but it was prevented from doing so by a few zombie arms reaching out. Fingers clawed at the interior, grasping blindly for flesh as Anthony struggled with the door. A zombie's face appeared in the gap, teeth snapping as it tried to force its way inside. "Drive, drive, drive!" Anthony yelled, his voice cracking with panic. Matt threw the car into reverse, slamming on the gas while cutting the wheel sharply to the right. The engine roared in response, the sudden acceleration pressing them back against the seats. The tires spun, catching after a couple of seconds, the violent turn sending the zombies trapped in the door flying. Their bodies hit the pavement with sickening thuds, but they were already beginning to rise again as the car pulled away. Anthony lost his grip on the door, but kept his other arm firmly wrapped around Norma, who seemed to be enjoying the entire endeavor despite the danger. Her face showed an almost childlike glee as the car fishtailed across the parking lot, zombies scattering before it. When Matt slammed on brakes to put it into drive, Anthony grabbed the door and pulled it shut, the locking mechanism engaging with a reassuring click. The momentary deceleration caused Norma to slide forward, nearly hitting the dashboard before Anthony pulled her back. Matt looked forward, spotting a horde of ghouls running their way. Their faces were masks of hunger, blood, and other fluids staining their clothes and skin. He hit the gas, picking up speed before turning abruptly towards the highway. The engine strained under the sudden demand for power, but responded admirably, propelling them forward with increasing velocity. Everyone inside the car bounced around as they jumped the curb, driving over the sidewalk before getting to the road. The suspension groaned in protest, the undercarriage scraping against the concrete edge before the wheels found purchase on the smoother surface of the highway. It took him a moment to regain control of the car, the steering wheel fighting his grip as the tires sought traction. The police cruiser swerved dangerously, nearly clipping an abandoned sedan before Matt managed to straighten its course. But before they knew it, they were speeding to the south, the strip mall receding in the rearview mirror. They looked in the rearview mirror, seeing a horde of zombies giving chase, but falling further and further behind. The creatures continued running long after a normal person would have given up, but the distance between them and their pursuers grew with each passing second, the zombies eventually becoming small dots in the mirror. They breathed a sigh of relief as they went, the immediate danger behind them. Anthony relaxed his grip on Norma slightly, though she remained perched on his lap, the two of them crammed into the passenger seat. The highway stretched before them, remarkably clear compared to the bridge they had left behind. Occasional abandoned vehicles dotted the sides of the road, and twice they had to swerve around accidents, but for the most part, their path was unobstructed. Next up, Avon. Chapter 10. The chatter in the police cruiser was non-existent, as the three survivors were in a state of shock, the ride giving their minds a chance to process the day's events. Each was lost in their own thoughts, replaying the horrors they had witnessed since that morning. Matt's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, the dried blood on his hands cracking in the creases of his skin. The weight of Walter's death pressed down on him, along with the fate of Keith and his injured friends abandoned on top of the tractor-trailer. His mind kept returning to the moment when the zombies had descended upon Walter, the man's scream still echoing in his memory. In the passenger seat, Anthony and Norma remained in their awkward arrangement, her perched on his lap, both too exhausted to complain about the discomfort. Anthony stared out the window, his usual talkative nature silenced by trauma. The young man who had shown up for work that morning was gone, replaced by someone older, harder. Norma's face was uncharacteristically somber, her sharp wit temporarily dulled by the day's events. Matt kept them moving at a steady pace, but not too fast. They'd come too far to risk an accident. The highway stretched before them, mostly clear but still requiring careful navigation around the occasional abandoned vehicle or debris. Each mile that passed brought them closer to the relative safety of Matt's home, to Stephanie. As they approached the bridge that would carry them over to the next island, they spotted another police car that was parked across the road, blocking both lanes. The sight of the vehicle caused them all to sit up straighter, fearful of what they might find. Well, at least one officer is still at their post, Anthony remarked, breaking the long silence. Matt reached over, flicking on the lights on top of the car. He didn't hit the siren, hoping that the lights would be enough to identify themselves as non-hostile. The blue and red lights reflected off the surrounding surfaces, creating an eerie display as they approached the roadblock. A few seconds later, an officer emerged from the car, shotgun in hand. He stood with the confidence of authority, legs planted firmly, weapon held at the ready. The man squinted against the flashing lights, trying to make out the occupants of the approaching vehicle. "Oh, he's going to be pissed that we're in this car," Anthony muttered, shrinking down slightly in his seat. "Just be cool, we're going to be all right," Matt replied, trying to project a calm he didn't entirely feel. The sight of the shotgun was concerning, but the fact that the officer was clearly alive and alert rather than one of the walking dead was a promising sign. As they got closer, the officer spotted their faces, keeping the shotgun at the ready. His expression was guarded, suspicious, as he watched the police cruiser slow to a stop. Norma got a better look at him, her face lighting up with recognition. "Well, it's about time we had something go our way," she said, straightening up slightly. "You know him?" Matt asked, glancing over at her with surprise. "That's Officer Bowman. We go way back. He's a regular at the bar," Norma explained, a small smile forming on her lips for the first time in hours. "I guess that means you're doing the talking then," Anthony said. Matt slowed to a stop about 5 yards away from the officer, putting it into park so that Norma could get out. The engine idled smoothly, a reassuring rumble in the otherwise quiet surroundings. Norma threw open the door, stepping into the open with surprising energy, given the day they'd had. "Funny meeting you here, Bowman," she called out, her voice carrying easily in the still air. Officer Bowman's posture changed instantly at the sound of her voice, the shotgun lowering slightly as recognition dawned on his face. He was a man in his mid-40s, with a weathered face and the solid build of someone who spent time at the gym but also enjoyed his beer. "Norma, what in the hell are you doing down here?" he asked, disbelief evident in his tone. "Same thing as you, I suppose. Trying to get away from that madness," she replied, gesturing vaguely northward where they had come from. "Are you bitten?" Bowman's question was direct, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. The shotgun, while lowered, remained in his hands, ready at a moment's notice. "No, I'm not, and neither are my two friends," Norma assured him, her tone serious. She understood the gravity of the question, having seen firsthand what happened to those who were bitten. Bowman turned his attention to Matt and Anthony, who gave him a half-hearted wave from inside the car. His gaze lingered on the police cruiser, clearly noting that these were not officers in uniform. "Now, why don't you put that shotgun away and we can talk?" Norma suggested, crossing her arms in a posture that Matt recognized from the bar. It was her "I'm not taking no for an answer" stance. Bowman looked down at the weapon in his hands, nodding and putting it back into the car. The gesture was a significant one, a sign that he trusted Norma enough to let down his guard, if only slightly. "Thank you. Now, I'm guessing by that look on your face, you know what's going on?" Norma asked, her tone softening somewhat now that the immediate tension had eased. "I don't know a lot, only that whatever this is started last night, and it's only gotten worse as the hours have gone by," Bowman admitted, running a hand over his short-cropped hair. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept since it all began. "So what are we supposed to do?" Norma asked. "Get across the bridge and find some place to lay low," Bowman advised, gesturing toward the span that would carry them to the next island. "Not that I have any intention of going back north, but is there any reason you want us to head towards Hatteras?" Norma asked. "Because there's a lot fewer people down there, and they're already working on pacifying the threat," Bowman explained, his voice dropping slightly as if sharing classified information. "So it's safe?" Hope crept into Norma's voice, a dangerous emotion in their current circumstances. "Safe is a relative term," Bowman replied grimly, the honesty of his answer somehow more reassuring than false promises would have been. "Fair enough," Norma acknowledged with a nod. "But it's going to be a lot safer once we block this bridge off. I got some boys running to the hardware store to get whatever they can," Bowman said. Norma thought for a moment, realizing that them racing down here most likely drew zombies after them. The creatures had shown a propensity for following movement and sound, and their escape from the strip mall had been anything but quiet. Well, unless those things get distracted, you're probably going to have some company before too long, she warned, her expression apologetic. Where are you coming from? Bowman asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Bowman looked at the police car suspiciously, but trusted Norma enough to know she didn't hurt anybody to take it. His gaze took in the vehicle's condition, the scratches along the sides where zombies had clawed at it, the smears of blood on the front bumper, the dents from their hasty escape. Up at the strip mall, the one with that good donut place. The door was wide open and the engine running, Norma explained, carefully omitting the fate of the car's original driver. And Officer Mason? Bowman's question was quiet, his eyes already showing that he suspected the answer. Norma fell silent, looking away, not sure of how to respond. Her non-answer was answer enough for Bowman. The officer's shoulders slumped slightly, another name added to what was surely a growing list of lost colleagues. I see. A lot of that happening today, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. A horn honked from down the bridge, everybody looking to see a pickup truck headed their way, the sound cutting through the somber moment. You three get a move on, I got some work to do, Bowman said, straightening his posture and resuming his professional demeanor. Norma nodded at Bowman before retreating to the car, slipping back on top of Anthony's lap. The younger man winced slightly as she settled her weight on him, but made no complaint. After Walter's death, such minor discomfort seemed trivial. Get driving, she instructed Matt as she pulled the door shut. Yes, ma'am, Matt replied, putting the car back in drive. Matt pulled out slowly, moving around the police car as the pickup truck pulled up. He looked in the back, spotting half a dozen men and a collection of fencing materials. It was lightweight and likely wouldn't hold back many zombies, but it was better than nothing. The men in the truck bed looked tired and frightened, but determined, just ordinary people trying to protect their community from an extraordinary threat. As they crossed the bridge, the three survivors remained silent once more, each lost in thought. The water stretched out on either side, a vast expanse of blue that seemed mockingly peaceful compared to the chaos they had left behind. Matt drove them south several miles, finally passing a sign for the small community of Avon. A few wrecked cars dotted the road, and a handful of lifeless bodies were scattered about, but no active zombies. The evidence of conflict was there, but it appeared that whatever battle had taken place here had already been decided. In the parking lot to their right, three men stood in the back of a pickup truck, all clutching hunting rifles. They watched the police cruiser pass with wary eyes, weapons at the ready, but not aimed directly at them. Matt turned to the right, entering a small neighborhood filled with large houses. Most of them sat empty, second homes for snowbirds from up north. But on the front deck of his home sat Stephanie, who stood up when she saw the police car pull into the driveway. She had been waiting, probably for hours, watching the road for any sign of her husband's return. Matt could see the worry on her face, which vanished as soon as he stepped out. The transformation was immediate, fear giving way to relief and joy in the span of a heartbeat. "Honey, I'm home," Matt called out, the simple phrase carrying the weight of everything they had survived to reach this moment. She broke into a bout of happy tears before running inside so that she could make her way down the stairs. A few seconds later, she rushed out the front door, running to her husband and wrapping him up tightly. "I'm so glad you're home," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her arms were strong around him as if she feared he might disappear if she let go. "Me too. Are you okay?" Matt asked, pulling back just enough to look at her face, to reassure himself that she was truly unharmed. "Yeah, a couple of those people were running around the neighborhood, but they were taken care of," Stephanie replied. "That's good, because I've had my fill of them," Matt said, tapping his hammer, blood still coating it. Stephanie looked down, her face awash with worry, which was wiped away as he pulled her in tight. "I hope you don't mind, but I brought a few friends along," Matt said, gesturing toward the car, where Norma and Anthony were awkwardly extracting themselves from the passenger seat. Stephanie looked over, seeing Norma and Anthony waving at her. Her smile was immediate and genuine, the kind of warmth that had made Matt fall in love with her in the first place. "Of course, you can stay here as long as you need to. I'm afraid we only have the one spare bedroom though," she offered, already shifting into the role of hostess despite the apocalyptic circumstances. "That's all right, he's young and keeps me up half the night anyway," Norma replied with a wink, smacking Anthony on the ass. The gesture was so unexpected, so outrageous given their situation, that it shocked him and everyone present. They stared for a moment, before everybody broke out into laughter, a much-needed tension break. The sound seemed foreign after the horrors of the day, but healing in its normalcy. For a moment, they could pretend that the world hadn't changed irrevocably around them. "Come on, let's get inside. I think we're all overdue for a shower and some dry clothes," Matt suggested, his arm around Stephanie's shoulders as he guided them toward the house. The others nodded at Matt, appreciative that he had led them through the darkness and into the light, even if they didn't know what laid ahead for them. The future was uncertain, filled with dangers they were only beginning to understand. But for now, they had found a moment of respite, a port in the storm. The end.